Hey guys, tonight we're standing on the docks of Carthage in the province of Africa, and the year is 520 AD. The air is thick with the scent of salt, baked clay, and the sweet, dusty smell of wheat. All around you, massive transport cogs, their sails emblazoned with the Chi Rho, are being loaded with grain from the imperial granaries. Teams of stevedores, shouting in a coarse mix of Latin and Punic, roll barrels of olive oil and wine up the gangplanks. A cohort from the Legio III Augusta, their segmented armour gleaming in the sun, stands a relaxed but professional watch. Their eagle standard, the Aquila, catches the light, a brilliant spark of gold against the azure Mediterranean sky. This is a city of order, of commerce, of purpose. The great aqueduct of Zagwan, fully repaired and expanded 2 decades ago, delivers fresh water to 1 million souls. The public baths are full, the forums are bustling with robed officials and merchants, and in the university, scholars argue over translations of Virgil and the finer points of Euclidean geometry. This is a Roman city, the beating heart of a Roman province, the secure anchor of a Roman empire. It feels solid, it feels eternal. And this is where it all gets strange, because in the history you know, none of this should be here. This city should be the capital of a Vandal kingdom, a pirate state that for nearly a century bled the life from the Mediterranean. The aqueduct should be in ruins. The legions should be a memory. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Comment where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's step into the world that could have been. To understand why this thriving, stable world exists, you have to rewind. You have to travel back 60 years, not to a grand battle or a momentous decree, but to a moment of quiet, desperate resolve in the mind of one man. His name was Julius Valerius Majorianus, Emperor Majorian. In the history you were taught, he is a tragic footnote, the last competent man to wear the purple in the West, a flash of brilliance before the final darkness. He reigned for 4 short years, from 457 to 461, and he burned with a fierce reformist energy. He fought corruption. He tried to restore the debased currency. He passed laws to protect ancient monuments from being scavenged for building materials. And he knew, with the cold certainty of a seasoned general, that all of it was meaningless without Africa. The Vandal kingdom in North Africa, established by the cunning Gaiseric, was a knife held to the throat of the Western Empire. Africa was the breadbasket, the source of the annona, the grain dole that fed the massive, restless population of Rome itself. Its loss was an open economic wound, draining the Western state of its most vital tax revenues and its primary food source. For Rome to live, the Vandals had to be broken. Majorian assembled a colossal invasion fleet at Porto Solicitanus, near modern-day Alicante in Spain. 300 warships, accompanied by thousands of transports, prepared to carry an army that represented the West's last, best hope. And in your timeline, it ended in utter disaster before it even began. Gaiseric, a master of espionage and ruthless action, was warned by traitors within the Roman camp. He launched a surprise raid, and the Roman armada was burned at its moorings. It was a humiliation from which the empire would never recover. Majorian, his authority shattered, his grand design in ruins, was forced to make a humiliating peace. On his return to Italy, the powerful barbarian general, the Suebian Gothic magister militum named Ricimer, the man who had elevated him to the throne, saw his chance. The failed emperor was a liability. Ricimer had Majorian arrested, stripped of his robes and diadem, tortured, and beheaded near the river Iria on the 7th of August, 461. With him died the last glimmer of imperial resurgence. The next 15 years were a puppet show, with Ricimer pulling the strings until the final, pathetic deposition of Romulus Augustulus in 476. But that is not our story. That is not this world. In this timeline, the plot is uncovered. Perhaps a low-level clerk, consumed by a flicker of old Roman patriotism, overhears a conversation he shouldn't have. Perhaps a scout, more diligent than his peers, spots the movement of Vandal agents near the coast. The traitors are seized. Under interrogation, they reveal the Vandal plan. The surprise is turned. When Gaiseric's ships approach the harbour, they are not met by a sleeping fleet, but by a prepared Roman navy, spoiling for a fight. The battle is short and brutal. The Vandal raiders are annihilated. Majorian does not hesitate. The wind is with him. The gods, or God, have given him a sign. The fleet sails. Imagine the sight. The Mediterranean, no longer a Vandal lake but a Roman highway once more, churns with the oars of thousands of soldiers. They land not far from Carthage, and Majorian is at their head. He is not a distant emperor wrapped in silk in Ravenna. He is a soldier, a comrade, sleeping on the ground with his men, sharing their rations. The Vandal army, formidable for decades, has grown complacent. Their fighting style is based on swift cavalry raids, not the disciplined, grinding infantry warfare of the legions. They meet the Romans in open battle, and they are systematically dismantled. The Roman line holds against the Vandal charge, absorbs it, and then the counterattack begins. It is a slaughter. Gazeric is captured trying to flee to the interior, and he is brought before the emperor in chains. The news of the victory echoes across the Mediterranean like a thunderclap. In Gaul, Visigothic chieftains pause their squabbles, a new, cold apprehension dawning in their eyes. In Rome, the Senate, so long a rubber stamp for barbarian strongmen, erupts in genuine celebration. The city's populace, for whom the African grain is life itself, hails Majorian as a saviour, a new Scipio Africanus. When Majorian returns to Italy, he does not come as a defeated man to be murdered by his subordinate. He returns in the style of the great emperors of old. He celebrates a full triumph through the streets of Rome, the first for a victory over a foreign enemy in over a century. The cheering crowds see the captured Vandal treasures, the exotic animals from Africa, and Gazeric himself, walking in chains before the emperor's chariot. This is more than a military victory. It is a profound psychological pivot. The narrative of inevitable decline, a narrative that had gripped the West for 50 years, is shattered in a single day. The empire is not dead. It is not even dying. It is rising. And what of Ricimer, the kingmaker, the power behind the throne, the man who was preparing to discard Majorian like a broken tool? He is summoned to the imperial palace in Ravenna. He walks through corridors he once dominated. But the atmosphere has changed. The guards look at him differently. The courtiers no longer bow and scrape. He is no longer the master of the world. He is a servant awaiting the judgment of his master. He enters the throne room, and Majorian is waiting for him. The emperor is no longer the desperate statesman, but the conquering hero, clad in the purple of victory. Here is the true divergence. Majorian, now with the full support of the army, the Senate, and the people, and with the vast wealth of Africa refilling the state's coffers, does not need Ricimer. But a purge would be bloody and would risk civil war. Majorian is a pragmatist. Ricimer is offered a choice. He can retire to a vast estate with all his honours and wealth, a gilded cage from which he will never again influence politics. Or he can face a charge of treason, with the letters from the captured Vandal spies as evidence. Ricimer, ever the survivor, chooses retirement. The era of the barbarian puppet master is over. The emperor is now truly the emperor. The immediate ethical dilemma for Majorian is one of mercy versus security. In letting Ricimer live, he shows magnanimity, but leaves a potential rallying point for future dissent. In our timeline, his death was a tragedy. Here, his survival creates a new set of challenges. He has won the war, now he must govern the peace. The problems of the empire have not vanished. The Visigoths still control much of Gaul and Spain. The tax system is still corrupt. The bureaucracy is sclerotic. But now, for the first time in 2 generations, there is a solution: money. The African tax revenues begin to pour into the treasury at Ravenna. It is a torrent of gold, silver, and grain. This wealth could be used for anything. It could be used to build new palaces, to fund lavish games, to buy the loyalty of the elites. But Majorian, the soldier emperor, knows that such things are luxuries. Survival comes first. An empire is its army. The foederattive allied barbarian war bands that had served as the bulk of the Roman military, had proven their disloyalty time and again. They fought for a paycheck and for their chieftain, not for the abstract idea of Rome. Standing on the ramparts of his palace, looking out at a world he has just saved from the brink, Majorian makes a decision. The old system is broken. It cannot be patched. It must be replaced. The wealth of Africa will not be squandered. It will be used to forge a new Roman army. He will not bribe barbarians to defend the empire. He will once again create citizens willing to die for it. The gold of Carthage will be melted down and reforged into the iron of new legions. You are 17 years old, and your name is Gaius. Or maybe it's Flavius. It doesn't matter. Your name is as common as the dirt under your fingernails. You were born on this land, a vast latifundium in southern Italy owned by a senator you have never seen. Your father worked this land, and his father before him. You are a colonus, bound to this soil by law and by debt. Your world is the rhythm of the seasons, planting wheat, tending olive groves, harvesting grapes. Your future is a bent back, calloused hands, and the same stifling poverty that has been your family's inheritance for 100 years. Then, one day, they arrive. They don't look like the thuggish Foderati mercenaries you've seen before, with their wild hair, animal skins, and arrogant swagger. These men are different. They march into the village square in perfect formation. They are clean-shaven, their hair cut short. Their armor is not a mismatched collection of plundered gear, but uniform sets of gleaming iron scale mail, lorica squamata, that flexes as they move. They carry large oval shields painted with the imperial crest, and a long, weighted javelin that looks heavier and deadlier than the old pilum. They are led by a centurion whose polished helmet crest, dyed a deep crimson, seems to burn in the sunlight. He carries a vitis, a vine staff, the symbol of his authority. He unrolls a scroll and reads a proclamation from the divine Emperor Majorian, Augustus. His voice is crisp, clear Latin, not the guttural accent of a Gothic chieftain. The emperor requires men, not for a season of plunder, but for a lifetime of service. 20 years in the new legions of Rome. In return, you will receive regular pay in solid silver solidi, not debased bronze. You will be fed, clothed, and armed by the state. You will be trained as a professional soldier, a master of war, and upon your honourable discharge, you will be granted a plot of land not as a tenant, but as a full Roman citizen, free and clear, and a handsome pension. Your father spits on the ground. He mutters about the army being a death sentence, about foolish boys chasing glory, but you look at the centurion, you look at the immaculate discipline of his men, you look at your own hands, stained with earth, and you see not a death sentence, but an escape, a choice. For the first time in your life, you are being offered a choice that is not simply between which crop to plant or which master to serve. The choice is between the life you know and the life of a Roman. This is the great project of Emperor Majorian. It is not just a military reform. It is a social and economic revolution fueled by the reconquest of Africa. In Ravenna, surrounded by maps and fiscal reports, Majorian and his small circle of loyal administrators lay out the plan. It is a direct rejection of the late imperial model. For over a century, the empire had outsourced its defence to the very people who threatened it. Goths, Franks, Alans, and Vandals were paid to fight under their own kings, following their own customs. This was cheap, easy, and politically expedient. It was also suicide. Their loyalty was always conditional, their presence a corrosive acid on Roman society and military discipline. Majorian looks further back, to the source of Roman greatness. He studies the reforms of Gaius Marius, the man who created the professional legions of the late Republic. He studies Augustus, who institutionalized that army as the foundation of the empire. The lesson is clear. Rome's strength was never in its wealth or its walls, but in its citizen, soldier. The challenge is immense. The citizen class has been hollowed out, crushed between the great landowners and the barbarian migrations. Where will the recruits come from? The answer is radical. The recruiters for the new Legio I Africana Victrix and Legio II Italica Invicta bypass the cities and the estates of the powerful. They go directly to the source of Roman manpower, the rural poor, the dispossessed, the sons of coloni like you. They offer a contract, a solemn oath sacramentum. It is a path to dignity. The program is hideously expensive. The annual cost of just one of the new legions is enough to bankrupt a lesser state. But the grain and tax revenues from Africa, and a newly enforced, ruthless collection of taxes from the previously exempt senatorial class, provide the funds. The training is relentless. You are sent to a new military camp near Ravenna. The first thing they do is strip you of your old identity. Your regional accent is mocked until you learn to speak the clear, clipped Latin of the army. You are drilled for 8 hours a day under the harsh Italian sun. You march 20 miles in 5 hours, then 24 miles in the same time, all while carrying 80 pounds of gear. You learn to build a fortified camp every single night, to swim rivers in full armor, to master the sword, the shield, and the new heavier javelin, the spiculum. This is not the wild charge of a barbarian warband. This is the science of organized violence. You are broken down and rebuilt, not as a farmer from Apulia, but as a soldier of the 8th cohort, 2nd century. Your loyalty is not to a local strongman, but to the eagle standard you now guard with your life, and to the distant godlike emperor whose name is stamped on your shield. This is the birth of the Eagles of Iron. They are a hybrid force, designed for a new era of warfare. The classic lorica segmentata is gone, too complex to mass produce and too vulnerable to the heavy shock cavalry of the Goths. It is replaced by the more flexible and resilient scale and mail. The rectangular scutum is replaced by the more versatile oval shield of the late Empire. But the core principles, the discipline, the engineering, the relentless training, and the cohort-based tactical system are resurrected and refined. These are not barbarians playing at being Romans. They are Romans, forged in a new fire. The ironic twist of this grand restoration is where many of its most zealous soldiers come from. After the initial legions are raised in Italy, Majorian expands the program. Recruiters are sent to Gaul, to Spain, and even to the newly pacified Africa. There, they offer the same deal to the young men of the tribes that Rome had just been fighting. The son of a Visigoth who fought against Rome in Gaul now finds he has more to gain by fighting for Rome. The son of a Vandal landowner in Africa, his family's wealth confiscated, finds his only path to prosperity is to enlist in the very army that defeated his father. This is the genius of the system. It co-opts the martial energy of the barbarian peoples, but detaches it from their tribal leadership. A Goth in the legions is not a Goth anymore. He is a legionarius. He swears the same oath, follows the same centurion, and bleeds the same colour as the boy from Italy, or the clerk from Hispania, standing next to him in the shield wall. The army becomes the ultimate engine of Romanization, more effective than any law or decree. It creates a new, unified identity based on service to the state. But this revolution creates a powerful and dangerous group of enemies, not on the frontiers, but in the heart of Rome itself. The ancient senatorial aristocracy, the great landowning families who trace their lineage back to the Republic, are horrified. They see Majorian's reforms as a threefold attack on their existence. First, he is taxing them. For generations, they had treated tax evasion as a birthright. But Majorian's new agents are implacable. Second, he is stealing their labor. By offering the colony a path to freedom and land, he is threatening the very foundation of their economic power, which relies on a vast supply of cheap, immobile tenant farmers. Third, and most terrifyingly, he is creating a massive, professional army loyal only to him. This is the great ethical tension of the era. Majorian is saving the Roman state, but he is destroying the Roman social order. He is behaving like a dictator, an autocrat, demolishing centuries of aristocratic privilege to forge a new, centralized, militaristic empire. In their marble villas, the senators whisper that he is a tyrant. They write letters to one another, lamenting the end of their world. The rise of this new man who rules through the loyalty of up-jumped peasants and tamed barbarians. They see his actions not as salvation, but as the final degradation of the Roman ideal. The replacement of the senatus populusque Romanus with the iron will of a single master. They are correct to be afraid. Majorian knows that their power is a cancer on the state, and he intends to cut it out. The confrontation is inevitable. But for now, it is a cold war of decrees and quiet resistance. The senators can plot and complain, but they cannot stop the machine that has been set in motion. By 470 AD, a decade after the victory in Africa, the first 4 of the new legions are fully trained and equipped. They are nearly 50,000 men, including auxiliary essa, professional standing army, the likes of which Europe has not seen in a century, and they are about to be unleashed. The order comes from Ravenna. The target is Gaul, where the Visigothic king, Euric, has been expanding his territory, acting less like a federate ally and more like an independent monarch. Majorian's message to him is simple. All of Gaul is Roman land. The Visigoths reside there as guests. A guest who forgets his place must be reminded. You stand in formation on the Via Aemilia. Your new iron-studded sandals, your caligae, feel solid on the ancient Roman paving stones. The eagle of your legion glints ahead. You are no longer Gaius the farmer. You are Gaius, legionary of the Second Italian Invincible. You have a future, you have a purpose, and your purpose is marching north. You have never seen a city like this. You thought Ravenna, with its imperial mosaics and solid brick basilicas, was the center of the world. You thought Rome itself, a magnificent, sprawling ghost haunted by its own history, was the ultimate expression of power. You were wrong. As your ship navigates the Golden Horn, flanked by the dromons of the Eastern Fleet, you understand that you have left the world of the living and entered a dream of what Rome once was, and perhaps what it can never be again. This is Constantinople. The Theodosian walls, a triple-layered marvel of stone and brick, loom over the landscape, a testament to a century of unbroken security. The sheer density of life is overwhelming. The docks teem with sailors and merchants from 1,000 ports. Their voices a babble of Greek, Syriac, Coptic, and a Latin. So archaic it sounds like a different language. The air, unlike the clean salt breeze of the Adriatic, is heavy with the scent of cloves and incense, of roasting meat, and the sweat of 500,000 people packed onto this peninsula. Palaces of white marble climb the 7 hills, and above them all, dominating the skyline, is the great church, the Hagia Sophia, its vast basilica roof a promise of heaven on earth. You are Lucius Fabius Sceva, a junior notarius in the service of the Western Emperor. You are a new man, your family having gained its modest senatorial rank, not through ancient lineage, but through your father's loyal service in Majorian's fiscal reforms. You are here as part of an embassy, but it is an embassy unlike any the West has sent in your lifetime. You are not here to beg. You carry no pleas for gold, no requests for soldiers, no desperate appeals for grain. Your legation, led by the stern Praetorian prefect of Italy, has come to negotiate. You have come as equals. Or so you thought. The court protocol is a suffocating labyrinth. For days, you are guided through endless corridors of the great palace by silent, white-clad eunuchs. Every step is ritual, every gesture codified. You are instructed when to bow, how low, to whom. The Eastern officials, the patricioi and magistri, drift past in robes of Tyrian purple silk, their faces placid masks of polite condescension. They call your master Majorian, the emperor in Italy, a subtle but unmistakable insult. There is only one Basileus, one emperor of the Romans, and he sits on the throne of Constantine. When you are finally granted an audience, you enter the Chrysotriklinos, the golden reception hall. The chamber is blinding. The sun reflects off gold mosaics depicting Christ Pantocrator and the triumphs of Eastern emperors. The air is thick with incense. At the far end, upon a raised dais, sits Leo I Augustus, surrounded by his Varangian guard, though at this time they are mostly Goths and Isaurians, not yet the famous Norsemen. Leo is a Thracian of humble birth, a soldier emperor like Majorian, but he has fully embraced the divine theatre of Byzantine rule. Your prefect delivers his speech in crisp, formal Latin. The West salutes the East. The West celebrates the shared victory of Christendom over the Arian heretic Gaiseric. He recounts Majorian's campaigns, the pacification of Africa, the successful war against the Visigoths in Gaul that has pushed them back behind the Garonne River, the subjugation of the Suebi in Spain. It is a litany of strength, a declaration that the corpse of the West has risen from its grave. Then comes the point of the visit, the Praetorian prefecture of Illyricum, the vast, mountainous territory of the Western Balkans. For decades, as the West weakened, Constantinople had absorbed its administration, claiming it was merely protecting the region. It is a vital land, a primary source of the best soldiers for the Roman army. Majorian wants it back. It belongs, by the old divisions of Diocletian and Theodosius, to the western pars of the empire. Your prefect makes the case with impeccable legal and historical logic. Emperor Leo listens, his face impassive. He does not reply directly. Instead, he speaks in Greek, his words translated by a quavering logothete. He congratulates his brother Majorian on restoring a measure of order in the western provinces. He speaks of the unity of the Roman world, a seamless garment woven by God. He calls the request for Illyricum a technical administrative matter, to be studied by commissions and synods. It is a masterpiece of polite refusal. The message is clear: what we hold, we keep. You stand in that shimmering hall and you feel a cold fury. For 50 years, the East watched the West burn. They offered platitudes, a few useless legions for a combined fleet that failed, and then wrote it off as a lost cause. Now that the West has, by its own blood and iron, pulled itself back from the abyss, the East will not yield an inch. They treat you not as a restored brother, but as an upstart challenger. This is the birth of the Great Schism, but it is not the one you know from history. It is not, at its heart, about the filioque clause or the nature of the Trinity. It is about power. The restored Western Roman Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire are two eagles sharing one nest, and the nest is not big enough for both. A cold war descends upon the Mediterranean. It is a war fought not with legions, but with spies, diplomats, and priests. You see it firsthand in the streets of Constantinople. You are followed. The friendly Greek merchant who invites you to his home to drink wine is reporting your every word to the Bureau of Barbarians. The doctrinal arguments that erupt between the Latin priests in your retinue and the Greek bishops of the city are not truly about theology. When they argue over the authority of the Bishop of Rome, they are really arguing about whether Ravenna or Constantinople is the true center of the Christian Roman world. The real-world anchor of Illyricum becomes the primary battleground. Eastern agents foment unrest among the tribes along the Danube, encouraging them to raid Western territory to keep Majorian's new legions occupied. They send shipments of gold to the Gepid kings, gifts, to ensure their loyalty to the Eastern court. In response, Majorian's agents move into Dalmatia, shoring up loyalty among the local bishops and garrison commanders. It is a game of shadows, of quiet threats, and political maneuvers, played across the Balkan Peninsula. The ironic twist is profound. The West's survival, the very event that should have strengthened the Roman world, is what truly divides it. A weak, failing West was a compliant junior partner. A strong, resurgent West is a rival. The Eastern court, in the deep, cynical recesses of its political mind, almost preferred the chaos. It left them as the undisputed heirs to the Roman legacy. Majorian's success is a threat to their very identity. They are no longer the only Roman Empire, and so they will work, subtly but surely, to undermine the West's newfound stability. This creates the central ethical dilemma of this new world. What does it mean to be Roman? You, Lucius Fabius Scaevola, were raised to believe in Roma Eterna, the single, universal, eternal empire. Yet here you are, serving one Roman emperor against another. You look at the wonders of Constantinople and feel a surge of pride in your shared heritage. You see the aqueducts, the forums, the law courts, and know they spring from the same source as your own. But you also feel the cold sting of their ambition, their refusal to acknowledge your legitimacy. Your loyalty, you realize, is not to the abstract idea of Rome. Your loyalty is to the West, to Ravenna, to the gruff, pragmatic soldier emperor who gave your family a future and who is forging a new, harder, less refined, but fiercely proud Latin identity. The embassy leaves Constantinople with gifts and empty promises. The prefect is silent for most of the voyage home, staring out at the waves. You know his thoughts. The formal unity of the empire is now a fiction. There are two Romes. They may not be at war, but they are certainly not at peace. They are competitors in a zero-sum game, for resources, for military recruits, for the loyalty of border peoples, and, most importantly, for the ultimate prize, the sole claim to the legacy of Augustus and Constantine. As you sail west, past the coasts of Greece and into the Ionian Sea, you feel a change in the very air. The soft, perfumed winds of the east give way to a harsher, saltier breeze. You are going home, back to an empire that is less golden, less silken, but more real. It is an empire of iron and will. An empire that is fighting for its life not only against the barbarians, but against its own twin. The fall of Rome in 476 was avoided, but in its place, a permanent, irreparable fracture has been carved down the center of the Roman world. The struggle for the future is just beginning. The first thing that strikes you is the noise. It is not the hushed, prayerful silence you might associate with the preservation of knowledge. It is the steady, rhythmic scrape of 100 styluses on wax tablets, the rustle of papyrus scrolls being unrolled, the sharp snap of vellum being stretched on a wooden frame. It is the low murmur of debate from the portico, where students and masters argue the merits of a line of Virgil. It is the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer from the engineering faculty, where they are attempting to reconstruct a full-scale ballista based on ancient diagrams. This is not a monastery. This is the Imperial University of Ravenna, founded by decree of the Emperor in 485 AD. and it is a factory of the mind. You are Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, the son of a Pannonian army surgeon who earned his citizenship and a small pension serving in Majorian's legions. You are here on an imperial scholarship, a beneficiary of the new system that seeks out talent not just in the marbled villas of the old families, but in the gritty, practical world of the provinces. Your world is one of ink, parchment, and endless reading. You are a philologist, a humble soldier, in the war against decay and forgetting. In the history you know, this place would be a swamp. The intellectual light of the Latin West would have guttered and shrunk to a few flickering candles in isolated monastic scriptoria on the windswept coasts of Ireland or the fortified hills of Italy. Monks, praying for the souls of a fallen world, would be the only ones copying the ancient texts, and they would do so selectively. They would preserve the church fathers, the Gospels, and some of the safer pagans like Virgil, whose Aeneid could be read as a pre-Christian allegory. But the vast corpus of Roman secular knowledge, the treatises on architecture, hydraulics, medicine, law, and especially history, would be left to rot. Most of it would be lost forever, waiting centuries to be rediscovered by chance or brought back from the Arab world. That did not happen here. The fall was averted, the state endured, and a state, particularly a revitalized Roman state, locked in a cold war with its eastern rival, understands that knowledge is power. Libraries are as important as granaries. Scribes are as vital as soldiers. Emperor Majorian, and the line of pragmatic soldier emperors who followed him, saw the decay of knowledge as a symptom of the disease that almost killed the West. The solution was typically Roman, direct, organized, and state-funded. A decree was issued, levying a new tax on provincial landowners, the tributum librorum, the tax of books, to fund a massive new undertaking. Imperial agents were dispatched to every city in the West. They did not just collect taxes, they collected texts. From the dusty municipal libraries of Gaul, from the private collections of senators in Spain, from the old academies in Carthage and Rome, they gathered every scroll and codex they could find. These were brought to central scriptoria, the greatest of which is here in Ravenna. Your workshop is a long, well-lit hall. Sunlight streams through large panes of expensive, clear glaser technology the state subsidizes for its official buildings. You and 50 other scholars are engaged in a monumental task, creating the first standardized, authoritative edition of Livy's Ab Urbe Condita, his history of Rome from its founding. The project is a perfect expression of the new era. It is patriotic, it celebrates Roman virtue and military success, and it provides a clear, state-approved narrative of who you are and where you come from. It is a bulwark against the Greek cultural arrogance of Constantinople. We have our own history, our own language, our own greatness. You work with a dozen different manuscript traditions of Livy, some of them centuries old and riddled with scribal errors. Your job is to compare them, to collate the texts, to debate variant readings, and to produce a single perfect master copy. From this master copy, a team of professional scribes will then produce hundreds of identical codices for distribution to libraries and schools across the empire. It is the slow, patient, vital work of building a civilization's memory. You feel an immense pride in it. You are not merely a copyist. You are a guardian of the flame. But this perpetual library has a shadow. It is a library with walls, and the state is the librarian. The state decides which authors are worthy of a new edition. Virgil, Cicero, Livy, Frontinus on aqueducts, Vegetius on military matters. These are given the highest priority. Their texts are copied onto the finest vellum, sometimes with gilded illuminations. They are the canon. One evening, in the deep stacks of the library, searching for a reference to an obscure Republican-era treaty, you find it. It is a set of scrolls, papyrus, brittle with age. The script is difficult, but you recognize the acidic, brilliant style. It is Tacitus, his annals and histories. You unroll a scroll carefully. You read of the paranoia of Tiberius, the madness of Caligula, the savage cruelties of the year of the 4 emperors. Tacitus writes not with the patriotic fervour of Livy, but with a cold, aristocratic contempt for the very system of imperial rule. He sees emperors not as saviours, but as the destroyers of Roman liberty. He paints a picture of a state built on fear, hypocrisy, and the slow erosion of virtue. A cold dread trickles down your spine as you read. This is not the Rome you are taught to celebrate. This is its dark, rotten heart. You ask your master, a venerable old scholar named Drusus, about Tacitus. Why is he not on the curriculum? Why is there no state-funded project for a new edition? Drusus looks at you, his eyes weary. Tacitus is pessimistic, he says, choosing his words with care. He writes of a time of weakness and depravity. The divine emperors have restored the state. We look to the future, not to the failures of the past. His work is not useful. Not useful. The phrase chills you more than any outright ban. In this world, the state does not need to burn books. It simply starves them of oxygen. There is no funding to copy Tacitus. No scholar will get a promotion for studying him. He is not forbidden, merely neglected, left to crumble into dust in a forgotten corner of the library. It is a quiet, bureaucratic, and utterly effective form of censorship. The state that saves knowledge also curates it, shapes it, and defangs it. This is the central paradox of your age. The West has not suffered a dark age. There has been no catastrophic loss of learning. Instead, you are living through a continuous, state-managed Latin Renaissance. The knowledge of the ancients is not lost, but it is being streamlined. It is being forged into an ideological weapon for the Cold War against Constantinople and a tool for social cohesion at home. This is the great ethical dilemma you face. You can feel the brilliance, the terrible truth in Tacitus, but your career, your security, your very place in this world depends on you focusing on the useful truths of Livy. To champion Tacitus would be to mark yourself as a malcontent, a critic of the imperial system that has given you everything. The ironic twist is that the very success and stability of the Western Empire is what prevents a true intellectual revolution. In our timeline, the chaos of the early Middle Ages, the fragmentation of power between kings, nobles, and a powerful independent church created cracks. In those cracks, dissent could grow. Universities like Bologna and Paris arose with a degree of independence from secular rulers. The rediscovery of Aristotle via the Arab world in the 12th and 13th centuries was a disruptive shock that the decentralized system could, eventually, absorb. It led to scholasticism, to new ways of thinking that paved the way for the Renaissance and the scientific revolution. Your world has no such cracks. The system is too unified, too efficient. Innovation is incremental and state-directed. The engineering faculty might perfect the water wheel and develop early forms of steam power for mining pumps, but it is all in service to the state's economic and military needs. There is no room for the kind of paradigm-shifting, system-questioning thought that flourishes in chaos. The light never went out, but it is now filtered through an imperial lens, and it casts no sharp shadows. Your world is brighter, but it is also flatter. You roll up the scroll of Tacitus and place it back on its dusty shelf. You have a choice. You can return to your well-lit, comfortable desk and the patriotic certainties of Livy, ensuring your career and the gratitude of the state. Or you can return to this dark corner by candlelight and secretly study the historian who tells you that the price of this golden age of stability might be your own soul. The perpetual library has saved the memory of Rome, but you wonder if it has imprisoned its spirit. You are standing in the mud, and the ceaseless, grey drizzle of the Gallic frontier. The year is 498 AD. Before you is chaos, a sea of churned earth, felled trees, and the raw, smoking skeletons of 100 watchtowers. Behind you is order. The newly completed Castra Regina Majoriana, a fortress of stone and brick, its lines as clean and unforgiving as a diagram from a geometry text. Its gates are flanked by statues of Mars and Victoria, and from its highest point, the eagle of the Legio V Gallica stares east across the Rhine, a silent, golden challenge to the endless dark forest on the other side. Your name is Quintus Valerius Corvus. You are a Prefectus Fabrum, chief of the engineers for the 5th Legion. War is not your trade, but you are its most essential instrument. While the legionaries fight the battles, you secure the victory. You build the bridges that allow the army to cross impassable rivers, the siege engines that smash defiant walls, and most importantly, the fortresses that turn conquered land into Roman territory. This fortress, your latest and greatest work, stands where a generation ago there was only a collection of Frankish longhouses. The taming of the north. That is what the poets in Ravenna are calling it. In the court of the Emperor, the aging but still formidable successor to Majorian, they see it as a grand restoration, the final chapter in the war to save the West. For you, on the ground, it was a decade of brutal, methodical work. After the Visigoths were confined to a small corner of southwestern Gaul and the Suebi broken in Spain, the legions turned north. Their target was the loose confederation of Frankish tribes under their ambitious king, Childeric. In the history you know, Childeric was a clever player in the game of imperial collapse. A Roman foederatus, he fought for the empire while slowly carving out his own kingdom from the carcass of Roman Gaul. His son, Clovis, would unite the Franks, convert to Catholicism, and lay the foundation for a new nation, France. That Childeric never existed here. When the new legions of the Western Empire marched to the Somme, they were not the demoralized patchwork army of the 460s. They were the Eagles of Iron. They did not come to negotiate a federation. They came with the cold, simple message Majorian had perfected. Submit or be destroyed. Childeric, faced with a disciplined army of 20,000 men that moved and fought like a single organism, saw his warriors break and flee. His treasury at Tournai was seized. He was captured, dragged to Ravenna, and forced to prostrate himself before the emperor. He was then allowed to rule his people as a client chieftain. His son held as a hostage in the imperial court to ensure his good behavior. There will be no Merovingian dynasty. There will be no Clovis. The seed of France has been sterilized in the womb. The campaign was a showcase of the new Roman way of war. Not just battle, but total strategic dominance. After the Frankish armies were scattered, your work began. This is the real conquest. A network of paved roads, straight as a spear cast, was driven through the forests of northern Gaul, connecting the new fortresses on the Rhine to the old heartlands of the south. The land was surveyed, gridded, and distributed to legionary veterans. The old tribal centres were either razed or rebuilt as Roman-style towns with a forum, a bathhouse, and a temple to the emperor. This is the Roman machine at its most terrifyingly efficient. It does not just defeat its enemies, it digests them. Gallic nobles who cooperate are given Roman titles and positions in the local administration. Their children are educated in Latin schools. Those who resist are crucified along the new military roads. A stark lesson for all who pass. The language of the Franks, the worship of Woden, the entire cultural world of the Germanic tribes west of the Rhinite, is all being systematically ground down, replaced by the universal, practical, and inescapable culture of Rome. And now, with Gaul pacified and the Rhine frontier a hardened shield of stone and steel, The Emperor has turned his gaze to a ghost, a lost province. Britannia. For nearly a century, the island has been lost to the fog of history. After the legions withdrew in the early 400s, it descended into a nightmare of plague, famine, and civil war between Romano-British warlords. Saxon, Anglo, and Jute raiders from across the North Sea began to settle on the eastern coasts, carving out petty kingdoms with fire and sword. In our timeline, they would become the English. In this timeline, their nascent kingdoms are about to be stillborn. From the new naval base at Gesariacum, Bologna, the invasion fleet sets sail in the spring of 497 AD. It is a statement of power aimed as much at Constantinople as it is at the British warlords. We have secured our heartlands. Now we reclaim what was lost. You are with the invasion force. The landing is a brutal affair. The Saxon shore forts, which had been abandoned for decades, are now manned by warriors in horned helmets, fighting with a desperate ferocity. But their shield walls cannot stand against the disciplined firepower of the legionary cohorts, whose heavy spicular javelins punch through their defences before the methodical, grinding advance of Roman swordsmen even begins. Within a year, the Saxon kingdoms of Kent, Sussex, and Wessex are shattered. The legion marches north into the heart of what had been Roman Britain. Here you find a strange, haunted land. The great villas are ruins, their mosaic floors covered in weeds. The cities, like Londinium and Eboracum, are shells, inhabited by a fraction of their former population. The people are a mix of Celtic-speaking Britons and the descendants of Roman colonists, their Latin thick with a strange, lilting accent. They are Christians, but their church is isolated, cut off from the continent for generations. They are ruled by men who call themselves kings, but wear old Roman armour and claim descent from magistrates and generals. This is the ironic twist of your mission. You have not come to conquer a foreign people. You have come to reclaim your own. These are the last remnants of the Roman West that was trapped in amber. They greet you with a mixture of fear and wondrous relief. The tales of Rome had become legends, bedtime stories of a lost golden age. And now the legends have returned, marching up the old stone roads in new iron armour. Your job is the biggest of your career. You are tasked with overseeing the restoration of the northern frontier, Hadrian's Wall. It is a monumental undertaking. For 73 miles, from the Solway Firth to the River Tyne, the wall is cleared, its forts re-garrisoned, its mile castles rebuilt. You stand on the cold stone, the wind whipping off the Scottish Highlands, and you feel the immense weight of history. You are literally rebuilding the edge of the civilized world. But this restoration has a brutal price. This is your ethical dilemma. You are a builder, a bringer of order. You see the aqueduct you are designing for Eboracum, and you know it will save thousands from dysentery. You see the roads you are paving, and you know they will bring trade and security. You see the law of Rome being re-established, and you know it is more just than the arbitrary cruelties of a warlord. You are, by any rational measure, a force for good, yet you cannot ignore the cost. The wild, vibrant, chaotic freedom of this island is being extinguished. You watch as a Celtic shrine to a local water goddess is demolished to make way for a new bathhouse. You hear the priests from Italy lecture, the British bishops on their errors, their traditions and saints, dismissed as provincial and heretical. You see the children of the British kings taken to Ravenna to be educated, hostages to ensure their father's loyalty, their Celtic names replaced with proper Latin ones. You are saving Britannia, but you are also strangling it. You are replacing its unique, half-remembered Roman Celtic identity with the standardized, monolithic Romanitis of Majorian's new empire. Standing on the completed wall, you look at your maps. the Western Empire is whole again. From the mountains of Scotland to the deserts of Africa, from the shores of the Atlantic to the plains of Pannonia, it is a single, unified, secure state. There is no England, there is no France, there is only Rome. The future of Europe has been irrevocably altered. The messy, violent but dynamic crucible that forged the nations of our world has been replaced by a vast, orderly, and deeply conservative empire. The North has been tamed. Its spirit, however, may have been broken in the process. You are Brother Paulus, a canon lawyer in the service of the Holy See. Your office is a small, chilly room in the Lateran Palace in Rome, the ancient residence of the popes. The walls are lined with scrolls and codices, the canons of Nicaea, the letters of Saint Jerome, the powerful theological arguments of Augustine of Hippo. For you, these are not just texts. They are the architecture of a kingdom. Not a kingdom of this world, with legions and tax collectors, but the kingdom of God, and its appointed regent on earth is the man who sits on the throne of St. Peter. Today, however, the authority of that throne feels terrifyingly fragile. A courier, his horse still lathered from the hard ride on the Via Flaminia, has just arrived from Ravenna. He carries not a deferential inquiry, but a summons, an imperial summons. His Holiness, Pope Simplicius, is to present himself at the imperial court within the month. The document is brief, courteous, and as cold as a sword blade. The Emperor III of Majorian's line, a grim veteran of the Britannic campaigns named Constantius, wishes to discuss the Church's contribution to the new Fiscus Britannicus, a special fund established to pay for the permanent garrison and reconstruction of the reclaimed province. In the hallways of the Lateran, there is a hushed panic. Old cardinals whisper of the dignity of the Apostolic See, of the historic turning back of Attila by the sainted Pope Leo, an act of spiritual power that no emperor could match. They speak of the Petrine Mandate, the keys to heaven and earth. They insist the Pope cannot be summoned like a mere provincial official. You know they are clinging to a dream. You see the reality of the situation with the clear, pitiless logic of a lawyer. The power of Pope Leo came from the absence of the emperor. He stepped into a vacuum. Now, there is no vacuum. There is a plenum of power, a solid, unyielding imperial presence that has restored the roads, rebuilt the aqueducts, and garrisoned the city of Rome with a full cohort of the Legio II Italica Invicta. Their barracks are on the Caelian Hill, and from your window you can sometimes see the glint of their eagle standard. It serves as a constant, silent reminder of where true temporal authority now resides. This is the great neutralization of the papacy. In the world you know, the fall of the Western Empire created the conditions for the rise of the Pope as a major secular and political power. The Church was the only large-scale, literate, and organized institution left standing amidst the ruins. It became a landowner, a diplomat, a power broker. Here the empire never fell. The institution that would have replaced it was never given the space to grow. The journey to Ravenna is a calculated humiliation. The Pope's retinue is small. There are no cheering crowds lining the road. Imperial officials greet him at each stop with perfect, chilling courtesy. He is not a spiritual father making a visitation. He is a subject answering his master's call. When he is finally ushered into the presence of Constantius II, the scene is not one of negotiation. The emperor does not sit in state. He receives the Pope in his private study, surrounded by maps of the northern frontier and stacks of fiscal reports. Constantius is in a simple soldier's tunic. His face is scarred. His hands are calloused. He does not ask for the Pope's blessing. He gets straight to the point. "Your Holiness," he begins, his voice devoid of warmth. "The pacification of Britannia has cost the state dearly. It is a holy endeavour, bringing thousands of Christian souls back into the fold of the empire, and under the proper guidance of the Church. He gestures to a ledger. These are the costs. The state requires the Church, as the largest landowner in Italy, to contribute its fair share. 20% of all ecclesiastical revenues for the next decade. Pope Simplicius, a man of genuine piety and deep learning, attempts to argue. He speaks of the Church's mission to the poor, of its ancient exemptions from taxation, of the spiritual authority that stands apart from the temporal. Constantius listens patiently. When the Pope is finished, the Emperor walks to a window that overlooks the legionary training ground. "I see 1,000 young men down there," he says, his voice quiet. "They are training to go to the Rhine, or to the Danube. They will die in mosquito-infested swamps and frozen forests to protect this empire, which includes your churches, your monasteries, and your estates. They give their blood. I am asking you for gold. Which is the greater sacrifice?" In that moment, the argument is over. The Pope can appeal to God, but the Emperor commands the legions. To refuse is not just dissent, it is treason. The Church will pay the tax. This establishes the new relationship, the Imperium Christianum of the West. It is a form of Caesaropapism, but with a pragmatic Latin flavour. The Emperor is the supreme head of the state. The Church is an integral part of the state. The Pope is its highest-ranking spiritual official, the Patriarch of the West. His role is to maintain doctrinal unity, to manage the clergy, to pray for the Emperor, and to lend divine sanction to imperial policy. He is powerful, he is respected, but he is subordinate. His authority is on a gilded leash, held firmly in the Emperor's hand. The ironic twist is how this affects the character of the Western Church. Stripped of the ambition to become a state within a state, its energies are turned inward. The bishops and priests, their paths to secular power blocked, focus on theology, liturgy, and pastoral care. The Western Church becomes more pious, more mystical, and more uniform. Doctrinal disputes that, in our timeline, might fester for centuries are resolved by imperial decree. A synod is called. Arguments are heard, and then the Emperor, advised by his chosen theologians, makes a ruling. Those who refuse to accept it are not just heretics, they are rebels. They are exiled or executed. The Arianism that lingered for centuries among the Goths in our timeline is stamped out within a generation. There is no room for religious pluralism in a state that demands absolute unity. The Church's art also changes. It no longer builds its own monumental basilicas to showcase its power. The great new churches in Rome, Carthage, and Ravenna are imperial constructions celebrating the piety of the Emperor. The mosaics depict Christ crowning Constantius, or Majorian leading his armies under the sign of the cross. The Church has been co-opted as the propaganda wing of the imperial government. This is the ethical dilemma that consumes your life, Brother Paulus. You took your vows to serve God and his Church, and the Church is safe. It is wealthy, its doctrines are protected, and it is spreading across the entire restored Western Empire. The legions have carried the cross back to the forests of Germany and the highlands of Britannia. By any measure, the faith is flourishing. But is it the true faith? You read the letters of Ambrose of Milan, who famously defied an emperor, declaring that the emperor is in the Church, not above it. In your world, Ambrose would have been sent to a penal colony in the Sahara. You read Augustine's City of God, with its sharp distinction between the flawed, earthly city and the perfect, heavenly one. Now, the two cities have been merged by imperial decree. The empire is presented as the city of God on earth, and to question it is to question God's plan. Your work as a canon lawyer is now mostly aligning church law with imperial edicts. You are a cog in a machine of control. You know in your heart that a faith that cannot speak truth to power has lost its prophetic voice. A church that cannot defy a sinful ruler is a church that has made a deal with the devil for its own security. You look at the summons on your desk, now a historical document. Pope Simplicius lived out his days as a respected but ultimately powerless figure. His successor was elected only after the emperor's favoured candidate was made clear to the College of Cardinals. The golden eagle of the empire has settled atop the cross, and it is heavy. It provides shelter, but it also casts a long, dark shadow. You have peace, you have order, you have unity, but you have lost the one thing that men like Ambrose and Augustine believed was worth more than all of it: the freedom to say no to Caesar. You are standing on a watchtower made of baked mud brick and local stone, staring east. The sun is a merciless white disk in a sky the colour of faded parchment. Below you, the land shimmers with heat, a vast ochre emptiness of sand and rock that stretches to a horizon that promises nothing but more of the same. This is the Limes Egyptiacus, the Egyptian frontier, and it is the edge of your world. A deep, wide ditch, the fossa, runs for miles in either direction, its far bank studded with sharpened stakes. Behind it is the wall, and behind the wall are the forts, the granaries, the cisterns, the entire apparatus of the Roman state, planted defiantly in the face of the great desert. The year is 642 AD. Your name is Marcus Vettius Drusus, and you are a centurion of the Legio III Africana Pia Fidelis. Your family has served in this legion for 3 generations. Ever since Majorian's conquest gave your Vandal ancestors the choice between enlistment and dispossession. You are a Roman. The language you speak, the god you worship, the armour you wear, the laws you obey of it is Roman. This frontier is not some distant, forgotten outpost. It is the sacred shield of your civilization, and for the past year, something has been pressing against that shield. It began as whispers, carried on the hot desert wind. Stories brought by terrified refugees, their faces gaunt, their eyes wide, with a strange horror. They were Coptic Christians, fleeing from Alexandria, from the Nile Delta, from the heart of Egypt. They spoke of riders from the desert, men of unparalleled speed and ferocity, united by a new prophet and a new god. They called them the Saracens. At first, the prefect in Carthage dismissed the reports. The East has always been a land of strange cults and sudden, fleeting conquerors. The Eastern Emperor in Constantinople had lost a province, a catastrophe for him, but a distant problem for the Western Empire. The long-standing rivalry, the Cold War between the two Romes, meant that a loss for the Greeks was, in a quiet, shameful way, a gain for the Latins. Then the riders came for you. They were not like any enemy you had ever fought. The Picts in the mists of Britannia were savages. The Frankish chieftains were brutal but predictable. These men were different. They moved across the sand like a mirage, a flickering mass of cavalry that seemed to have no supply lines, to live off the desert itself. Their first probes were met with arrogance. A cohort of auxiliaries was sent out to disperse them. It never came back. Then came the first major assault, led by their general Amr ibn al-As, a name that would soon be spoken with a mixture of hatred and grudging respect across the frontier. You watched from this very tower as his army materialized from the east. It was not a horde, it was a disciplined force, moving with a terrifying purpose. They expected to find the crumbling defences of the old Byzantine province. They expected to roll over a demoralized garrison. They found you. They found the eagles of iron. When their cavalry charged, they were not met with wavering spearmen. They were met with a forest of heavy spicula, thrown in a perfectly timed volley that ripped through their front ranks. turning their charge into a maelstrom of screaming men and horses. They crashed against a wall of shields, the big oval scooter of the new legions, locked together, immovable. Behind the wall, the legionaries, 2 ranks deep, did their work with the short, stabbing gladius. It was not a battle of heroic duels, it was a machine for killing. The Saracens were brave. They fought with a fervour that was unsettling, a belief in paradise that made them seem fearless of death. But bravery is no match for relentless, organised geometry. They broke. They fled back into the desert, leaving hundreds of their dead before your walls. The victory was total, but it was not final. They came back. Again and again. The limes Egyptiacus has become the defining reality of your life. A line of blood and sand that separates the Roman world from the new, terrifying power of Islam. The war is not one of conquest, but of attrition. They control the desert. You control the coast, the cities, the farmland, the Mediterranean. Your Mediterranean, the Mare Nostrum, remains a Roman sea. From your watchtower, you can see the grain ships sailing from the port of Cyrene, their sails bearing the imperial cross, heading for Italy, undisturbed. The breadbasket is secure. This new reality has forced a seismic shift in geopolitics. The centuries-old rivalry with the Eastern Empire in Constantinople has not vanished, but it has been put on ice. An endless stream of envoys now travels between Ravenna and Constantinople. Your emperor, Valentinian IV, a descendant of Majorian's house, and the Eastern Basileus, Heraclius's successor, are now bound in an alliance of necessity. The West holds the line in Africa. The East holds it in Anatolia. They are 2 pillars holding up the roof of a single, besieged house. This is the great irony of your age. The strength of the Western Empire, the very thing that made it a rival to the East, is now the only thing keeping the East from being completely overwhelmed. By stopping the Muslim armies in Libya, you have prevented a 2-front war that would have certainly crushed Constantinople. The Caliphate in Damascus cannot bring its full weight to bear against Anatolia, while a powerful, hostile Roman army sits on its Egyptian border. The proud, condescending Greeks now depend for their survival on the barbaric Latins they once scorned. Your legion, once a symbol of Western resurgence and defiance to the East, is now the East's unwitting protector. This is a truth no one speaks aloud in the courts, but every soldier on this frontier knows it. You are the shield, not just for Rome, but for all of Christendom. And this has become the new ideology of the empire. The emperor is no longer just Imperator and Augustus. He is now the Defensor Fidei, the defender of the faith. The war is cast in stark, absolute terms. It is a holy war, a clash between Christ and the false prophet, between civilization and savagery, between light and darkness. The Church, long since subordinated to the state, is the primary engine of this propaganda. Priests in every town from Britannia to Italy deliver sermons calling for young men to join the legions and fight the holy war on the desert frontier. A special Saracen tax is levied to pay for the endless conflict. Your world has become defined by this single existential struggle. But here, on the line itself, the stark certainties begin to fray. This is your ethical dilemma. Last month, your patrol captured a small trading caravan that had strayed too close to the line. Among the prisoners was a scholar from Damascus. He was not a warrior. He was an old man with ink-stained fingers and eyes that held a deep, quiet intelligence. You were ordered to interrogate him. You spent a week with him, speaking in the broken Greek that serves as a lingua franca on this border. He was not the demon of the priest's sermons. He spoke of his God, Allah, with a love and a piety that was as profound as any Christian monk's. He showed you his mathematics, a system using the concept of zero that made the cumbersome Roman numerals you used seem childishly primitive. He spoke of medicine, of astronomy, of a world of learning and discovery flourishing in Damascus and Baghdad, a world that seemed more vibrant than the curated, conservative scholarship of Ravenna's Imperial University. He asked you, "You Romans build walls to keep the world out. We build roads to bring the world to us. Which is the act of a stronger people?" His question haunts you. The state tells you these people are savages. The man before you was more learned than your own provincial governor. The state tells you they are godless. But you saw him pray 5 times a day, his face filled with a serene devotion. You are supposed to be the light, and they the darkness. But you begin to wonder if you are just 2 different kinds of light, destined to burn against each other forever. You are a Roman soldier, sworn to kill these men. Yet, you are beginning to respect them. You see their strength, not just in arms, but in faith and knowledge. And that is a terrifying thought. Because if they are not the monsters you are told they are, then what does that make you? You look out from your tower. The sun sets, painting the desert in shades of blood and purple. In the distance, you see the flicker of campfires. Theirs. You know they are out there, praying to their God, preparing for the next battle. And you are here, praying to yours. The fall of Rome was avoided. But you are trapped in a new kind of fall, a slow, grinding descent into a perpetual war that sanctifies the empire, while bleeding it dry, a war that preserves your world by locking it in an eternal struggle with its own reflection. The noise hits you first, not the chaotic din of a city or the clangor of a battlefield, but a sound that is both monstrous and beautiful. It is a deep, rhythmic, earth-shaking thunder that seems to come from the very bones of the mountains. It is the sound of 1,000 tons of water, diverted from the roaring Alpine river beside you, being channeled through stone aqueducts and spilling down onto the blades of 64 massive water wheels. The wheels, set in 8 parallel tiers down the hillside, turn in perfect, glistening unison. Their motion drives a forest of camshafts, trip hammers, and transmission belts within the vast brick building below, a structure so large it dwarfs the Colosseum. The air is cool and smells of wet stone, hot iron, and machine oil. This is the great imperial fabrica of Mediolanum, nestled in the foothills of the Alps. The year is 710 AD. This is the sound of a new age being hammered into existence. You are Lucius Cornelius Priscus, Magister of the College of Artificers. And this symphony of controlled power is your creation. You are not a senator of ancient lineage or a battle-hardened general. Your hands are stained with grease and ink, not blood. Your grandfather was a stonemason. Your father was a military engineer who helped rebuild the forts in Britannia. You are a new kind of Roman hero, the problem solver. And the empire has a very big problem: manpower. The eternal grinding war on the limes Aegyptiacus consumes men. The vast garrisons in Britannia, Gaul, and along the Rhine and Danube consume men. The professional army, the pride of the restored empire, offers a path to citizenship and land, which means fewer men are willing to remain as labourers on the great estates. The state is strong, secure, and running out of hands to do its work. The Praetorian prefect laid it out for you in a stark memorandum 5 years ago. The legions require 50,000 new sets of armour, 100,000 spicula, and 1,000,000 yards of sailcloth for the fleet. Our workshops, relying on muscle and beast, cannot meet 1/10 of this demand. Solve it. So you did. You turned to the wisdom of the ancients, not to the poets, but to the engineers like Vitruvius and Frontinus, whose works were preserved and copied in the Imperial University. You found inspiration in the ruins of the Barbagal mill in Gaul, a wonder of the old empire. But Barbagal was for grinding flour. Your task was to forge an empire. The complex before you is Barbagal's brutal, industrial descendant. Inside that main building, water-powered trip hammers, each weighing half a ton, pound red-hot iron ingots into uniform plates for lorica squamata, scale armor. One hammer, operated by 3 men, does the work of 50 blacksmiths. In another hall, water drives gigantic looms that weave sailcloth of a strength and size impossible to achieve by hand. Water-powered saws slice timber for shield cores. Water-powered grindstones sharpen tens of thousands of spearheads and sword blades, all to a perfect, standardized specification. This is not craftsmanship. It is mass production. It is the Roman genius for organization and engineering applied to the tools of war. The products of your fabrica have transformed the legions. The old, piecemeal equipment of the early Restoration is gone. Now, a soldier in Scotland wears the same quality armour, carries the same balanced javelin, as a soldier facing the Saracens in Libya. The Eagles of Iron are not just trained as one, they are now equipped as one. But your greatest challenge, and your most terrifying success, lay far from here, deep underground. The silver mines of Hispania and the tin mines of Britannia, vital for currency and bronze, were flooding. As the shafts went deeper, the old drainage methods, Archimedes' screws powered by legions of slaves or convicts, were failing. The prefect's message was again simple. The mines are the lifeblood of the treasury. Keep them dry, or the state will falter. These explitus, mines of the lifeblood of the treasury. You locked yourself in your study with the texts of Hero of Alexandria, another treasure from the Perpetual Library. You obsessed over his Eolipile, a hollow sphere that spun when heated, a so-called steam engine. The Alexandrian Greeks saw it as a temple curiosity, a toy. You saw a source of power. The principle was simple. Heat turns water to steam, and expanding steam can create motion. For weeks you experimented, building bigger and bigger models, nearly blowing up your workshop twice. The breakthrough came when you abandoned the idea of rotational motion. You didn't need to spin a wheel. You needed to move a piston up and down. The result stands today, deep in the silver mines of the Sierra Morena Mountains. You call it the Machina Vaporist, vapor machine. It is a monster of bronze and iron. A massive boiler, fed by coal, heats water into steam, which is piped into a cylinder, driving a piston that works the crank of a massive pump. With a rhythmic, hissing sigh, it draws 1,000 gallons of water an hour from the deepest shafts. It is crude, inefficient, and consumes a mountain of fuel. But it works. The mines are dry. The silver flows to the imperial mint. And you, Lucius Cornelius Priscus, have, without fully realizing it, uncaged a demon. You have created the world's first industrial steam engine. This is the great ironic twist of your era. This slow-burning industrial revolution born of military necessity is not liberating anyone. In the history you know, the Industrial Revolution shattered old social orders, created new classes, and sparked political revolutions that redefined the very idea of the individual and the state. Your revolution is doing the opposite. It is reinforcing the power of the state. The Fabrica is not a private enterprise. It is an imperial institution. The thousands of workers who live in the sprawling, gridded town that surrounds it are not free labourers. They are fabricenses, hereditary state workers. They live in clean, identical stone barracks. They are fed from a communal kitchen, their health tended to by a state doctor. Their children attend a state school where they learn Latin, mathematics, and the skills needed to replace their parents at the looms or forges. They are well cared for. They have a security unknown to the starving peasants of old. And they are utterly unfree. Their lives are governed by the ringing of a giant water clock that signals the start and end of their 12-hour shifts. They are cogs in your great machine, as interchangeable as the armor plates they produce. This is your ethical dilemma, and it gnaws at you. You have just returned from Ravenna, where the Emperor himself bestowed upon you the title of patrician, a rank your ancestors could not have even dreamed of. You are hailed as a savior of the Empire. Your machines are the silent legions, winning the endless war through production. You should be proud, and you are. When you see the precision of the gears, when you hear the thunder of the hammers, a part of you soars. It is a triumph of reason, of order over chaos. But then you walk through the workers' town at dusk. You see the faces of the people. They are not unhappy. They are not oppressed in the old, brutal way. But there is a blankness in their eyes, a quiet resignation. There is no art here that is not state-approved. There is no philosophy, no debate, no messy, vibrant, chaotic human energy. There is only the rhythm of the machine. You have solved the Empire's manpower problem by making men into extensions of your technology. Your steam pump in Spain is a marvel. But already, governors from other provinces are sending requests. They see its potential. For draining swamps to create more taxable land. For powering mills on a scale even you haven't imagined. You have given the state a tool of immense power, and the state will use it not to free its citizens, but to manage them more efficiently. You are celebrated as a great builder, but you fear you are building a cage, a gilded, comfortable, and inescapable cage that will encompass the entire Roman world. The sound of the shift-change bell echoes through the valley, a clear, metallic tone that cuts through the thunder of the water wheels. 1,000 workers emerge from the fabrica, and another 1,000 enter. It is all so perfect, so orderly, so inhuman. And you, the architect of this new world, are alone with the terrifying knowledge that the price of the Empire's eternal life may be its very soul. The air here is different. It's heavy, laden with the smell of wood smoke, damp earth, and something wilder, something you don't have a name for. You are standing on the northern bank of the Danube, at the crossing point opposite the great legionary fortress of Singidunum. The year is 780 AD. Behind you, across the wide, grey river, lies the Roman world. It is a world of stone bridges, paved roads, tile-roofed villas, and Christian churches where prayers are said in Latin for the health of the Emperor in Ravenna. It is a world of order. Before you lies the Barbaricum. It is a world of endless forest and swamp, of thatched roof huts clustered in muddy clearings, of campfires where warriors sing songs of ancient gods and drink fermented mare's milk. It is a world of tribes, of clans, of blood feuds and shifting alliances, and it is a world that, for the past 2 centuries, has been defined by a single inexorable fact: the wall. Your name is not Roman. It is Radovan. You are a chieftain of the Venedi, one of the countless Slavic-speaking tribes that have been migrating westward from the Pripyat marshes for generations. You are here to trade. At the designated market on the riverbank, under the watchful gaze of the Roman border guards from their wooden watchtowers, you will barter your goods samba from the distant Baltic coast. Thick furs, blocks of raw beeswax, and your most valuable commodity, slaves captured from rival tribes for the products of civilization. You will receive salt, which is more precious than gold in your world. Wine, a drink of intoxicating sophistication, and iron tools of a quality your smiths can only dream of producing. The wall is not a single, continuous structure like Hadrian's old barrier in Britannia. It is something far more formidable. It is the Danube itself, a massive natural moat. But this moat has been weaponized by Roman engineering and organization. The southern bank is a hardened military frontier, the Limes Danubianus, a chain of massive stone fortresses like Singidunum and Viminacium, connected by military roads, stands guard every 50 miles. Between them, a network of smaller forts and signal towers ensures that no crossing goes unnoticed. A permanent river fleet, the Classis Pannonica, patrols the water, its dromons armed with siphons that can spew Greek phyrea, terrifying technology gifted by Constantinople during the height of the Saracen threat, a rare instance of cooperation between the two Romes. This wall is not designed to be a passive barrier. It is a dam. For 100 years, the pressure has been building behind it. The great Slavic migrations, which in our timeline flooded into the Balkans, overran Greece, and reached the very shores of the Peloponnese, have been stopped here, at the Danube. The human tide crashed against the Roman shield and was thrown back upon itself. The Avar Khaganate, the dominant power in the Pannonian Basin, was shattered in a series of brutal campaigns by the legions 50 years ago. The Avars were broken, but the Slavic tribes they had dominated were not. And so, this is your world. A pressure cooker, confined to the north of the Danube, unable to push west against the pacified and heavily fortified provinces of Noricum and Pannonia. The Slavic peoples have been forced into a violent, chaotic competition for land and resources. The tribes fight each other endlessly. Alliances are made and broken in a single season. Your father was killed in a raid by the Sclavini. You, in turn, burned their villages and sold their women and children at this very market. It is a cycle of violence with no escape. This is the great, unintended consequence of Roman stability. By creating a hard, impermeable border, Rome has not pacified the barbarian world. It has turned it into a permanent cauldron of savagery. There is no possibility of a gradual assimilation. No chance for the emergence of stable kingdoms like the First Bulgarian Empire, which in our history arose from a fusion of Bulgar, Slav, and remnant Roman populations in the Balkans. Here, there are only Romans and barbarians. The line is absolute. At the market, you see the face of Roman power. The legionaries are tall, well-fed, and encased in standardized iron armor. They move with an unnerving discipline. Their centurion does not haggle. He dictates the terms of trade with a bored arrogance. You see the contempt in his eyes. He looks at you and sees not a chieftain, a warrior, a man, but an animal. A useful, dangerous animal to be managed. This is the ethical dilemma that defines the Roman frontier policy. It is a policy of containment and exploitation. Roman agents, the explorators, move unseen through your forests. They learn your languages, your rivalries, your weaknesses. They prop up one chieftain against another, providing a gift of 50 swords to your rival, just to ensure your tribes remain divided and at each other's throats. They do not want to conquer your land. It is too vast, too wild, too unprofitable. They simply want to manage the chaos, to keep the barbarian world weak and fragmented, a ready source of furs, amber, and, most importantly, slaves for the great estates and factories of the empire. The ultimate irony is that this policy is breeding the very thing it seeks to prevent. It is creating a new kind of barbarian. Your people are being hardened in a crucible of endless warfare. The weak are exterminated. The strong, the cunning, the ruthless, they survive. You are learning. You have seen how the Romans fight. You have captured their weapons, studied their tactics. You have begun to organize your warriors, not in a chaotic swarm, but in disciplined shield walls. You have learned that unity is the only path to survival. Last winter, for the first time, you met with the chieftains of 3 other major tribes. Not to fight, but to talk. You met in secret, deep in the forest, far from the eyes of the Roman spies. You spoke of a grand alliance. You spoke of forging a single nation, a union of the Slavic peoples, to break the wall and claim the rich lands to the south. The talk was of blood oaths, of a new god of war to unite you against the Christians' god. It was treason to the Roman order, but it felt like destiny. A new figure has emerged from the steppes to the east, a charismatic warlord of a new Turkic people, the Magyars. In our world, they would eventually settle in Hungary. Here, the Romans hold the Pannonian Basin. The Magyars are pressing west, a new wave of pressure against the Slavic dam. They are forcing a choice upon your people. Unite, or be crushed between the horsemen of the steppe and the legions of Rome. You finish your trading. You load your new iron axe heads and the precious bags of salt onto your pony. As you turn to leave, you look back across the river. You see the stone fortress, the symbol of an eternal, unchanging order. But you know it is not eternal. Nothing is. The Romans see you as a savage in a fur cloak. They do not see the mind behind your eyes. A mind that is learning, adapting, and burning with a cold, patient hatred. The wall has kept your people out, but it has also trapped them, contained their demographic and military energy, and concentrated it. You are part of a vast, simmering storm, building just beyond the horizon of the Roman world. The Romans think the fall is a distant memory. You know it is a future prophecy. The pressure in the boiler is rising. One day, the wall will break, and on that day, God help the world of stone, and order on the other side of the river. The sea is a fury of grey and white. A biting, salt-laced wind screams down from the north, tearing at the sail of your ship and whipping your oilskin cloak against your face. You grip the steering oar of your nar, a sturdy merchant vessel, your knuckles white. You are a Norseman, a man of the fjords, of long, dark winters and fleeting, bright summers. Your name is Eric, and you are a trader, not a raider. In the stories your grandfather told, that was not a choice a man had to make. The old man spoke of a different world, a world of a century ago, in the early 800s. He spoke of the dragon-prowed longships, packed with warriors, that would sweep out of the fjords in the spring. They would go a Viking, a glorious adventure of plunder and battle. Their targets were the rich, soft lands to the south, the coasts of Britannia and Gaul. They would strike at monasteries laden with gold, at undefended towns, at a world that had forgotten how to fight. They brought back silver, slaves, and glory. They were the wolves of the sea. That world is gone. You saw why on your last voyage south. You were attempting to trade for wine in the port of Burdigala, Bordeaux, in Aquitania. As you approached the coast, you were intercepted, not by other traders, but by a vessel that moved with unnatural speed and purpose. It was a dromon of the Roman Atlantic Fleet, the Classis Britannica. It was long and low, with two banks of oars that propelled it against the wind. A bronze-sheathed ram gleamed at its prow, and on its foredeck was a weapon that terrified you, a siphon, a bronze tube aimed at your ship. You had heard the stories of sea fire, a liquid flame that could not be quenched with water. A cohort of marines, clad in mail and helmets, stood on its deck, their shields locked, their spears ready. They did not attack. They simply escorted you to the customs port. Their presence, a silent, overwhelming statement of power. You paid the imperial tariffs. You conducted your trade under the watchful eye of Roman officials, and you left feeling not like a proud Norseman, but like a chastened child. The wolves have been declawed. The Viking Age, as your ancestors knew it, was strangled in its cradle. When the first Norse longships raided the coasts of Roman Britannia in the late 700s, they were not met by panicked monks and terrified villagers. They were met by the legions. The old Saxon shore forts, rebuilt and regarrisoned, provided a network of rapid response bases. The new Roman fleet, its designs copied from the war dromons of the East, hunted the raiders down in their own element. A raid on the monastery at Lindisfarne, which in another history was a shocking success that kicked off the Viking Age, here ended in disaster. The longships were intercepted by 2 dromons on their way home. The battle was a massacre. The sea fire turned the Viking ships into floating pyres. The few survivors who made it to shore were hunted down by the local legionary garrison. The news of the debacle spread through the fjords of Norway and the market towns of Denmark like a paralyzing poison. The path south was a path to death. The soft, rich lands were defended by a hard, professional, organized empire. This is the great rerouting of Norse energy. The immense demographic pressure, the ambition, the incredible maritime skill of your people, it could not be contained. If the path south was blocked, you had to find another. So you turned east, and you turned west, but not in the way of our history. You, Eric, are a trader on the Osterver, the Eastern Way. This is the main artery of Norse commerce. Your nar is loaded with walrus ivory, soapstone from the Shetland Islands, and fine woolen cloaks woven by your wife. You are sailing not for England, but for the vast, cold lands of the Rus. You follow the coast of the Baltic Sea to the mouth of the Neva River. From there, it is a grueling journey. You and your crew will haul your ship on rollers past river rapids, navigating a vast, interlocking network of reversed Volga, the Dnieper, that leads you deep into the heart of the great, dark landmass of Eastern Europe. Your destinations are the new towns that are springing up along this route. Aldeguborg, Holmgard, Konugard. They are fortified trading posts founded by Norsemen like you, a lifeline of commerce connecting the Scandinavian world to the riches of the south. But your southern destination is not the glittering prize of our timeline's Vikings. You are not trying to reach Constantinople. The Eastern Roman Empire is a formidable, hostile power, and the way is blocked by Pechenegs and other steppe nomads. Your ultimate prize is far stranger. It is the Caliphate. Your river road eventually connects with the trade routes that lead to the Caspian Sea and on to Baghdad. You trade your northern goods for silver dirhams, for spices, for silk. You are a merchant, connecting the Islamic world to the North Sea. This creates a new, hybrid culture in Eastern Europe. The Rus are not a nascent state seeking a Roman-style identity through conversion to Orthodox Christianity. They are a mercantile aristocracy of Norse traders ruling over a vast population of the Slavic tribes who were not absorbed by the Roman Empire. Their gods are Odin and Thor. Their language is Old Norse. Their orientation is not south to Constantinople, but southeast to Baghdad. The future nations of Russia and Ukraine are not being born. Instead, a Viking-run commercial empire, a Volga trade khaganate, is taking shape. Its culture a mix of Norse paganism and Islamic commercial influence. The ironic twist is that in taming the Vikings, Rome has created a powerful new rival on its eastern flank. The Roman Empire, in its focus on the hard frontiers of the Rhine, Danube and Africa, has largely ignored the vast wilderness to its northeast. It sees your people as distant fur traders. It does not see the state you are building, the wealth you are accumulating, the military power you are consolidating. This new Rus state is becoming a haven for all the peoples pushed aside by Roman expansion. Dissident Saxon nobles, rebellious Frankish chieftains, anyone who chafes under the heavy, orderly hand of the empire. This leads to your ethical dilemma. On your last trip to Holmgard, you met a man named Harold. He was a chieftain from Jutland, a true believer in the old ways. He despises the traders like you, who bow to Roman customs officials. He preaches a return to the path of the warrior, but his raids are not aimed south. He sees the folly in that. He speaks of a new kind of Viking raid. He speaks of uniting the Norse and Slavic tribes of the Rus into a grand army. His target is not a monastery. His target is the Roman limes on the Danube. He wants you to use your trading contacts to smuggle weapons, not Roman iron tools, but Frankish-style longswords and armour, bought with Arab silver, up the rivers to the gathering point for his new army. To help him is to risk everything. If the Romans catch you, they will crucify you. But to refuse him is to betray your own people, to accept the humiliation of being a tamed wolf. Harold calls you a Roman dog. He says you have traded your Viking soul for a handful of silver solidi. His words sting because you fear they are true. You look at the angry sea. The Roman Empire has brought peace to its coasts. It calls the Atlantic the Mare Tranquillitatis, the Sea of Tranquility. But it is a peace bought by force, a tranquility enforced by the threat of sea fire. By blocking the violent, chaotic energy of your people, Rome has inadvertently channeled it, concentrated it, and given it a new, far more dangerous direction. It has created a shadow empire on its own doorstep, an empire of the wild, pagan, and untamed, funded by the gold of Rome's greatest enemy. The Viking age of raiding may have been averted, but you have a sinking feeling that a far more terrible storm is gathering in the east, and men like Harold will be its vanguard. The air in the Basilica of St. Peter is thick with the scent of old stone, melting beeswax, and the cloying sweetness of incense. Light, filtered through high alabaster windows, falls in dusty shafts onto the polished marble floor. You are standing with 1,000 other priests, bishops, and deacons, a sea of white and purple vestments, facing the high altar. Before the altar, on 2 gilded thrones, sit the 2 most powerful men in the world. On the right is your master, Leo V, the Patriarch of the West, the Bishop of Rome. On the left is Photios II, the Ecumenical Patriarch of Constantinople. And between them, on a higher, more ornate throne, sits the man they both answer to, Flavius Theodosius III, Emperor of the West, Augustus. The year is 888 AD. This is the Great Council of Rome, and it is a carefully staged piece of political theatre. You are Father Ambrose, a junior theologian in the Roman delegation, a scholar of the Greek fathers, chosen for your ability to debate the subtle points of Trinitarian doctrine. You have spent months preparing for this. But as you stand here, you realize the theological debates are a smokescreen. This is not about the nature of the Holy Spirit. This is about power, legacy, and the final, formal sundering of the Roman world. For over 4 centuries, since the West pulled itself back from the brink, the 2 Romes have existed in a state of managed rivalry. They have been allies of convenience against the Caliphate, partners in a strained, reluctant defense of Christendom, but they have never been friends. They have competed for influence in the Balkans, for trade routes in the Mediterranean, for the loyalty of border peoples. And at the heart of their rivalry has been the Church. In our timeline, the Great Schism of 1054 was a divorce between a monarchical, authority-driven papacy and a collegiate, mystical orthodoxy. It was a religious event with political consequences. Here, it is the other way around. This schism is a political event with a religious justification. The trigger was the Bulgarian question. The Khan of the Bulgars, a powerful Slavic kingdom that had finally managed to coalesce on the far side of the Danubian limes, had decided to embrace Christianity. It was a major prize. Both Ravenna and Constantinople sent missions, lavishing the Khan with gifts, offering architects, priests, and theological arguments. The Khan, a canny political operator, played one side against the other. Finally, he chose the East. He would accept baptism from the Patriarch of Constantinople. For the Western Emperor, Theodosius, this was the final insult. For 200 years, the West had held the line against the Saracens in Africa, indirectly protecting the East. The West had tamed Gaul and Britannia, bringing millions of souls into the imperial church. The West had contained the Norsemen and the Slavs, and their reward was to be outmaneuvered, to have their influence snubbed on their own doorstep. Theodosius decided that the fiction of a single, universal Roman Church was no longer useful, so he called this council. The agenda is ostensibly to resolve the Filioque controversy once and for all. The Western Church, for centuries, has included the phrase "and the Son" in the Nicene Creed when describing the procession of the Holy Spirit. The Eastern Church has not. It is a subtle point, but one that touches the very core of the Trinity. You watch as the champions of each side debate. A Greek bishop, his beard flowing to his waist, argues with soaring rhetoric and intricate philosophical proofs from the Greek fathers. A Frankish bishop from the Rhine frontier, a man more used to building fortresses than debating theology, counters with blunt, legalistic arguments from the Latin fathers. It is a dialogue of the deaf. They are not just speaking different languages, they are operating within entirely different intellectual frameworks. The Easterners see the Western position as a logical absurdity, an unforgivable alteration to a sacred, ecumenically agreed creed. To them, it subordinates the Holy Spirit, disrupting the perfect balance of the Trinity. The Westerners, steeped in the Roman legal tradition, see it as a necessary clarification. If the Son is begotten of the Father, then the Spirit must proceed from them both, as a binding force of love. To deny it, in their view, is to diminish the divinity of Christ. But as the days wear on, you see the real argument taking place beneath the surface. When the Greeks speak of the consensus of the fathers, they mean their fathers, their unbroken tradition stretching back to the apostles. They see the West as a fallen, corrupted land, only recently pulled back from barbarism, a land whose theological innovations are suspect by definition. When the Latins speak of the authority of the Roman See, they are speaking of an authority granted not just by St. Peter, but by the backing of the Western Emperor. This is a clash of civilizations masquerading as a debate on theology. The ironic twist is the role of the Pope. In our history, the Pope was the prime mover of the schism, the champion of papal supremacy. Here, Pope Leo V is a tragic, conflicted figure. He is a pious man who genuinely believes in the unity of the Church. He sees the danger in this split, but he is also a creature of the Western Empire. His family's position, his church's wealth, his own office, all of it depends on the emperor's favour. He is a golden eagle on a golden chain. On the final day of the council, the emperor speaks. Theodosius is not a theologian. He is a soldier who has spent his life fighting on the frontiers. He stands and makes a simple, brutal proclamation. He declares that the Filioque is the correct and official doctrine of the Church within his domains. He announces the formation of the Imperial Latin Church, of which the Bishop of Rome is the Patriarch, but of which he, the Emperor, is the ultimate guardian and protector. He states that any cleric within the Western Empire who refuses to assent to this creed will be deposed and charged with treason. There is a stunned silence in the basilica. The Eastern Patriarch, Photios, rises to his feet, his face a mask of cold fury. He declares the Western Emperor and the Bishop of Rome to be heretics. He anathematizes them, excommunicates them. He formally breaks communion. The schism is complete. It is not a quiet parting of ways. It is a declaration of spiritual war. This is your ethical dilemma, Father Ambrose. You are a scholar. You have read the Greek fathers. In the quiet of your own soul, you have doubts about the Filioque. You see the elegance of the Greek position. You fear your side is driven more by imperial pride than theological truth. But you are a Roman priest. Your loyalty is to your patriarch, and your emperor. To voice your doubts now would be to end your career, to be branded a traitor to your church and your civilization. You look around the basilica. You see the faces of your fellow priests. Some are triumphant, their expressions filled with grim, nationalistic pride. Others look as troubled as you feel. They are being forced to choose a side in a battle that should never have been fought. The imperial schism redraws the map of the world. There are now three great powers in the orbit of the old Roman See. The Western Roman Empire, with its imperial Latin Church, a bastion of militarized, authoritarian, Latin-inflected Christianity. The Eastern Roman Empire, with its Orthodox Church, a center of Greek culture, mystical theology, and bureaucratic resilience. And the Islamic Caliphate, a vast, dynamic civilization that looks at the two squabbling Christian empires with a mixture of contempt and opportunism. The dream of a universal Roman world, both politically and spiritually, is dead. It has been replaced by a tripartite struggle. You walk out of the basilica into the Roman sunlight, but the world feels darker. The unity that Majorian's victory promised so long ago has finally curdled into a permanent, bitter division. The West was saved from falling to the barbarians, only to declare its own brother a heretic. The House of Rome has not been destroyed from without, but has been deliberately, formally, and irrevocably broken in two from within. The year is 1050 AD. You are standing on the deck of a ship, but it is a vessel unlike any the world has ever seen. You call her the Audax, the Bold. She is not a coastal trading nar or a shallow draft Mediterranean galley. She is a Caravella Oceanus, a new breed of ship born from the workshops of the Imperial Naval Arsenal at Gades, Cadiz. Her hull is deep and rounded, built to withstand the immense pressures of the open ocean. She combines the square sails of the Atlantic tradition for power with the lateen sails of the Mediterranean for maneuverability. Most importantly, she carries a secret weapon, mounted on a swivel at her bow, a brand new, terrifyingly powerful magnetic compass, its needle floating in a gimbaled bowl of water, an invention perfected by the Imperial College of Artificers after studying strange descriptions of a south-pointing fish from the merchants of the Volga Rus. Your name is Gaius Livius Drusus, and you bear the title Praefectus Explorationis, Prefect of Exploration. You are a new kind of Roman official, a product of a new kind of Roman ambition. You are not a conqueror sent to subdue a province or a governor sent to administer one. You are a seeker, sent by the emperor to sail west, not just into the Atlantic, but across it, to find whatever lies beyond the endless blue horizon. For centuries, Roman ambition was directed inward and eastward. It was focused on restoring the old provinces, on defending the frontiers against the Saracens and the Slavs, on the Cold War with Constantinople. The Atlantic was a backyard, a quiet coast patrolled by the Classis Britannica. But the world is changing. The intelligence coming from your spies among the Rus traders in the east is disturbing. They speak of vast, wealthy empires in the heart of Asia, a place they call Cathiand, of a sea route around the southern tip of Africa, to the even richer lands of India. The Caliphate and the Norse Rus control the land routes. The Eastern Romans control the sea routes through the Red Sea. The Western Empire, for all its military might and industrial power, is being locked out of the immense wealth of the Orient. The Emperor, a forward-thinking and deeply ambitious man named Magnus I, has decided to break the deadlock. He has listened to the scholars at the University of Carthage who, studying preserved texts of Greek geographers like Eratosthenes, argue that the world is a sphere. If the world is a sphere, then there must be another way to the east, a Western way. Your mission is born of this desperate, brilliant gamble. The official charter tasks you with finding a new sea route to the Spice Islands. But your secret orders read to you by the Emperor himself, are far more radical. Claim any new lands you discover for the glory of Rome and the Imperial Latin Church. Assess their wealth, their people, their military strength. Establish a foothold. You are the vanguard of a new chapter in the history of our empire. This is not a private venture funded by merchants, like the voyages of our timeline's age of discovery. This is a state-sponsored, military-led expedition. Your fleet consists of 3 ships, your Audax and 2 smaller support vessels, the Sella, the Swift, and the Fidelis, the faithful. Your crews are not scraped from the prisons and taverns of the waterfront. They are professional sailors from the Roman Navy, disciplined and loyal. You carry a cohort of veteran legionaries, their armor and weapons greased and stored below deck. You carry priests, engineers, and cartographers. This is an extension of the Roman state, sailing into the unknown. For weeks you have sailed west from the Pillars of Hercules, following the favorable trade winds you discovered on a previous, shorter probe. The sea is a terrifying, beautiful, monotonous void. The sky is immense. The men grow restless. They are Romans. Their world is the land, the familiar coasts of the Mediterranean. This feels like sailing off the edge of the world. Your new compass is their only comfort, a steady, magical needle that always points north, a thin thread connecting them back to the world they know. The ironic twist of your journey is its motivation. In our history, Columbus sailed west fueled by a mixture of apocalyptic Christian zeal and a desperate hunger for personal wealth and glory. He was an outsider, a Genoese hustler pitching a crazy idea to any monarch who would listen. You, Gaius Livius Drusus, are the ultimate insider. You are a servant of a stable, powerful, and deeply conservative state. Your mission is not born of disruptive innovation, but of calculated imperial policy. It is an act of supreme confidence, almost of arrogance. The empire has tamed the known world. Now, it will tame the unknown. Your journey is not a desperate gamble. It is seen as a logical, almost bureaucratic extension of Roman power. Then, after 33 days at sea, a lookout screams the word you have been praying for. Terror! Land. It begins as a smudge on the horizon, a darker line between the blue of the sea and the blue of the sky. As you draw closer, it resolves into a vision of paradise, an island of astonishing green, fringed with white sand beaches and palm trees that sway in the warm breeze. The air that drifts out to your ships is sweet with the scent of flowers and damp earth. You anchor in a sheltered bay. The water is a startling shade of turquoise. You go ashore with an armed escort. The land is lush, alien. The plants are unfamiliar. Strange, brightly coloured birds flit through the trees. And then you see them. The people. They emerge from the forest, cautious, curious. Their skin is the colour of copper. They are naked, their bodies painted with intricate designs. They carry simple wooden spears. They are not hostile, but watchful. You try to speak to them in Latin, in Greek, in the guttural Frankish you learned as a young officer on the Rhine. They do not understand. They speak a language that is like the chirping of birds. This is your ethical dilemma, and it strikes you with the force of a physical blow. Your orders are clear. Claim this land for Rome. Assess its people. But who are they? They are not Saracens, the hated enemy. They are not the wild Slavs or the calculating Norsemen. They have no cities, no walls, no armies. They seem to live in a state of primal innocence, a world before history, before empire, before the cross. The priest with you, a stern, zealous man named Father Augustine, declares them to be animae naturaliter Christianae souls, naturally Christian, waiting for the light of the gospel. He sees them as a blank slate upon which to write the glory of God. The legionary captain, a pragmatic veteran named Crixus, sees them differently. He assesses their spears, their lack of armor, their apparent lack of social organization. "They are children," he mutters to you. "We could conquer this whole island in a week." You, however, see something else. You see a question that shakes the very foundations of your Roman world. Your civilization defines itself by what it is not. You are Roman because you are not a barbarian. You are civilized because you are not a savage. You are Christian because you are not a pagan or a heretic. But these people fit none of your categories. They are not barbarians in the European sense. They are something entirely other. Does the writ of the Emperor, does the mandate of Christ even apply here? Are they human in the same way you are? Do they have souls? Or are they simply a new kind of fauna? A clever animal to be tamed or exploited? You order your men not to harm them. You offer them gifts, small brass bells, red cloth. They are fascinated. They touch your steel armor with wonder. You trade for fresh water and strange, sweet fruits. For a few days, a fragile, dreamlike peace exists in this bay. But you are a Roman. You have a mission. You must plant the standard. On the third day, you hold a ceremony on the beach. The legionaries stand in full formation, a jarring vision of iron and discipline against the lush green chaos of the jungle. The priest consecrates the land. You unfurl the imperial eagle, the golden aquila, on a field of purple, and drive its staff into the sand. You name the island Terra Nova New Land. You formally claim it, and all the lands that may lie beyond it, for the Western Roman Emperor Magnus I. The natives watch, their dark eyes unreadable. They do not understand the words, but they understand the symbolism. They see the swords, the armor, the implacable confidence in your eyes. They are witnessing the moment their world ends and a new one begins. You have not come as a plunderer like Columbus. You have come as an administrator. You have come to build, to organize, to Romanize. And in its own way, that is a far more terrifying and far more absolute form of conquest. You have crossed the ocean not to find a new way to the old world, but to begin the slow, methodical, and inexorable consumption of a new one. The city is called Nova Carthago, and it rises from the humid coastal plain of the Gulf of Mexico like a fever dream of Rome. The year is 1150 AD, a century after Drusus's first landing. At its center is a forum, paved with local limestone, surrounded by buildings of a style that is brutally, unmistakably Roman. A basilica for law courts, a curia for the provincial council, a public bathhouse, a 20-mile-long aqueduct, a marvel of engineering that crosses swamps and jungle, brings fresh water from the interior highlands. Its arches a testament to an unyielding will. The streets are laid out in a perfect grid. A stone amphitheatre, already half completed, is designed to seat 20,000 people. But this is not simply a Roman city transplanted. It is something new, something deeply strange. The stone of the basilica is carved not with acanthus leaves, but with the feathered serpents and jaguar heads of the local pantheon, repurposed as grotesque decorations. The crowds in the forum are a swirling mix of robed Roman officials, sun-darkened legionaries, and the native peoples of this land, the Nahua, the Totonac, the Huastec. Many of the locals wear simple Roman-style tunics, but their faces are still marked with traditional tattoos, their earlobes stretched with jade plugs. They speak a pidgin of vulgar Latin and their own tongue, a language of commerce and command. Atop the largest pyramid on the city's edge, a structure that once saw the ritual sacrifice of human hearts to the god Huitzilopochtli, there now stands a massive Christian cross, and beside it, the golden eagle standard of the Legio VI Novi Orbis, the Legion of the New World. You are Titus Valerius Scipio, the newly appointed governor of the province of Messica. You are a career administrator, a man who has served on the grey, damp frontier of Britannia and the hot, dusty frontier of Libya. You thought you understood the business of empire. You were wrong. This place is different. This is not the taming of a familiar barbarian. This is the ingestion of an alien civilization. The Roman colonization of the Novus Orbis did not happen like the Spanish Conquista. It was not a mad dash for gold by private adventurers. It was a slow, methodical, state-directed project. After the initial discoveries, the empire spent 50 years sending reconnaissance fleets, methodically mapping the coastlines, assessing the local powers, and identifying the strategic keys to the continent. They found what the Spanish found: vast, complex, and deeply stratified empires in the Central Highlands, rich in gold and silver, but plagued by internal rivalries and endemic warfare. The Roman approach was classic: divide et impera. They did not simply march on the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan. They spent a decade forging alliances with subjugated peoples like the Tlaxcalans, who chafed under Aztec rule. They presented themselves not as conquerors, but as liberators. They armed their allies with superior iron weapons, trained them in Roman tactics, and then, when the time was right, they supported their rebellion with the iron core of the legions. The war was long and savage. Tenochtitlan was not captured in a single audacious assault. It was besieged for 2 years, its causeways cut, its aqueducts severed, until it starved into submission. The aftermath was also uniquely Roman. The Aztec priestly class was systematically exterminated, their temples torn down, their codices burned. This was not an act of random vandalism. It was a calculated policy to decapitate the native culture and religion. The warrior aristocracy was offered a choice: swear allegiance to the emperor and convert to the imperial Latin Church, or be crucified. Many chose allegiance. They were given Roman names, allowed to keep their lands, and incorporated into the new administrative structure as a local elite, responsible for collecting taxes and levying workers for the great public projects. This is the system you now govern. It is a brutal but orderly fusion. The old Mesoamerican social structure has been co-opted, not destroyed. The common people still pay tribute to their local lords, but now those lords pay tribute to Rome. The vast peasant class is now a labor force for the empire. Instead of building massive pyramids for their gods, they are now building roads, bridges, and aqueducts for the emperor. The meter system of rotational labor, which the Incas used in South America, has been adopted and perfected by Roman administrators here. Every village must provide a quota of workers for the mines and the plantations. The irony is staggering. The Roman Empire, a state built on a foundation of law, engineering, and a nominal belief in a universal Christian brotherhood, is presiding over one of the most systematic and efficient systems of mass exploitation in human history. The gold and silver that flow from the mines of Messica and the newly opened province of Peruvia are flooding the imperial treasury in Ravenna. This new wealth is funding the endless wars against the Caliphate and the Rus. It is paying for new legions, new fleets, new public works back in Europe. The Novus Orbis is the new gold basket, that is guaranteeing the empire's dominance for another century. The price is the soul of this continent. Your ethical dilemma is embodied in a man you meet in your second week as governor. His name is Opochtli, but he was baptized with the name Paulus. He is a Tlaxcalan nobleman who fought alongside the Romans against the Aztecs. He is fluent in Latin, educated by priests from Ravenna. He is intelligent, capable, and utterly loyal to the empire. He is your most effective native administrator. One day, he comes to you with a request. A new silver vein has been discovered high in the mountains. To exploit it, the local legionary commander has demanded a levy of 5,000 men from Paulus's home province to work in the mine for a year. It is a death sentence. The mine is high, cold, and the work is brutal. A third of the men will not return. Paulus knows this. He comes to you, not to protest the order, but to ask for a concession. "My governor," he says, his Latin more perfect than your own, "my people will serve the emperor, but I ask that the levy be for 6 months, not a year, and that the families of the men who die be exempt from the grain tax for 5 years. It is a matter of justice." You look at this man. He is a barbarian who is appealing to the Roman ideal of Iustitia. But you know that the Praetorian prefect in Ravenna cares only about the quarterly shipment of silver. To grant Paulus's request would be to reduce the mine's output. It would be a black mark on your record. It would be seen as weakness. The system is designed for maximum efficiency, not for justice. The men are disposable. You are the governor. You have the power to do the right thing, to show mercy, to affirm that the ideals of Rome apply even here, in this strange and violent new world. But to do so would be to defy the very logic of the machine you serve. The Romanization of this continent is not a process of upliftment, it is a process of resource extraction. The aqueducts and roads are not for the benefit of the natives. They are to move silver to the ports and legions to the frontiers more efficiently. What you are building here is not a new Rome. It is a slave state on a continental scale, more orderly and far more sustainable than the chaotic plunder of the Spanish, but perhaps even more monstrous for its cold, bureaucratic logic. The great diseases of the old world, smallpox, measles, still ravaged the native populations, but the organized Roman response, with quarantines and military-enforced sanitation, blunted the demographic collapse. There are more survivors than in our timeline, but they are surviving in a world where their culture has been surgically removed and their labor has become a commodity. You grant Paulus a small concession, a 9-month levy, and a 2-year tax exemption. It is a pathetic compromise, and you both know it. He thanks you and leaves, his face a mask of dignified disappointment. You have preserved the system, but you have betrayed the ideal. The province of Messica is stable, productive, and secure, and it is built on a foundation of bones. The year is 1348. You are standing in the main square of Geneva, a prosperous city on the shores of Lac Léman, in the province of Maxima Sequinorum. The air is crisp and clean, and the city hums with the commerce that flows along the great Roman roads connecting Italy to the Rhine. But today, the hum is replaced by a tense, expectant silence. In the centre of the square, a great pyre has been built. Bundles of wood are stacked around a thick central post. Atop the wood are books, hundreds of them, hand-copied manuscripts, their vellum pages filled with dense, elegant script. This is not the burning of a heretic. This is the burning of a heresy. Your name is Brother Michel. You are a monk from a nearby monastery, a member of the Fratris Predicantes, the order of preachers, an arm of the Imperial Latin Church tasked with seeking out and correcting doctrinal error. You are here to witness the final, public repudiation of the teachings of Jean Calvin. Not John Calvin of the 16th century, the French reformer who reshaped Protestantism, but Jean Calvin of the 14th century, a brilliant, tormented theologian from the University of Paris. In this world, there is no Protestant Reformation. There can be no Reformation, because the conditions that created it never existed. The Western Roman Empire is a unitary state, and the Imperial Latin Church is its spiritual arm. There are no competing princes to grant sanctuary to a rebellious monk like Martin Luther. There is no powerful, independent papacy whose corruption and sale of indulgences could spark widespread outrage. Religious dissent is not a matter for debate. It is a matter for the state. It is treason. But heresy, like a stubborn weed, still grows in the cracks. The Church, for all its imperial backing, has become a vast, wealthy, and often complacent bureaucracy. The intellectual ferment in the great universities Paris, Oxford, Bologna, all operating under imperial charter, sometimes produces dangerous ideas. Jean Calvin was the most dangerous of all. He was a man obsessed with the majesty of God and the sinfulness of man. He studied the preserved texts of Augustine of Hippo, the great African father, whose work was central to Western theology. But Calvin read Augustine with a terrifying new intensity. He came to believe that the official church, with its rituals, its sacraments, its powerful hierarchy of priests and bishops, had become a barrier between man and God, not a bridge. He argued for a return to a simpler, purer faith, based on Scripture alone. He preached the doctrine of predestination in its starkest form. God, from the beginning of time, has chosen who will be saved and who will be damned, and nothing the church or the individual can do can alter that divine decree. His teachings were electrifying. They spread like wildfire among his students in Paris. And then, through letters and secretly copied manuscripts to other intellectual centers, he attracted those who were disgusted by the casual corruption of local bishops, those who felt alienated by the formal, impersonal ritual of the imperial church, and those who craved a more direct, personal relationship with God. For a few years, a secret Calvinist movement flourished in the scholarly heart of the empire. The state was slow to react. This was not a peasant uprising or a barbarian raid. It was a cancer of the mind, and it was hard to detect. But when the reports from spies within the university became too alarming to ignore, the hammer fell. The emperor's elite agents, the frumentari, descended on Paris. Calvin and his inner circle were arrested. Under interrogation, a process involving tools perfected by Roman ingenuity, they revealed the names of their followers across the empire. The purge was swift and brutal. Professors were dragged from their lecture halls, merchants from their counting houses. The trials were short. The charge was not just heresy, but majestic offense against the emperor's majesty. To challenge the imperial church was to challenge the emperor himself, who was its sworn protector. The leaders, including Calvin, were executed quietly, their deaths unannounced. They were not to be made into martyrs, but their ideas, their books, had to be publicly destroyed, exorcised from the body politic. And so you are here, in Geneva, watching the local magistrate read the imperial decree condemning Calvin's works. He lists the heresies, the denial of free will, the rejection of the sacraments as channels of grace, the arrogant claim that an individual could interpret Scripture without the guidance of the Church. The crowd listens in sullen silence. Many of these people had read Calvin's pamphlets. His ideas had offered them a powerful, if terrifying, spiritual comfort. Now they watch as the books that had given them hope are thrown onto the pyre. An imperial legionary, his armor gleaming, steps forward with a torch. He sets the wood alight. The flames catch, licking at the dry vellum. The books curl, blacken, and turn to ash. The smoke rises into the clear alpine air, carrying with it the last remnants of a rebellion of the soul. This is the great ironic twist. The stability and unity of the Roman Empire, the very thing that has prevented a dark age and created centuries of peace and order, has also created a spiritual and intellectual prison. The dynamic, chaotic, and often violent religious struggles of our timeline's Reformation, for all their bloodshed, unleashed powerful new forces. They shattered the unity of Christendom, but in doing so, they created pluralism. They promoted literacy as people were encouraged to read the Bible for themselves. They challenged old authorities and paved the way for new ideas about individual conscience, political liberty, and, eventually, secularism. The Reformation was a crucible that forged the modern Western mind. Your world has no such crucible. The heresy of the individual, the idea that a single person could stand alone before God, armed only with faith and Scripture, is a crime against the collective, a threat to the sacred unity of imperium and ecclesia. Your ethical dilemma burns inside you like a slow fire. You are a man of God, a loyal son of the Church. You have read Calvin's work. It was your duty to study it in order to refute it. And it terrified you. It was cold, stark, and stripped all the beauty and comfort from your faith. But you also recognized in it a powerful, honest zeal. You could not deny that Calvin was wrestling with the same profound questions of faith and salvation that had kept you up at night in your monastery cell. He was wrong, dangerously wrong, but he was not trivial. Now you are part of a system that does not refute heresy with superior argument, but with fire. Your order, the Fratres Predicantes, was founded to win hearts and minds through preaching and reason. But under the imperial church, it has become an ideological police force. You see the fear in the eyes of the people around you. They will go back to attending Mass. They will recite the Nicene Creed with the Filioque clause. They will baptize their children and pay their tithes. But what will they believe in their hearts? Have you saved their souls? Or have you just taught them to lie to God and the state for the sake of their own survival? As the last book collapses into embers, a chill runs through you that has nothing to do with the mountain air. The empire is safe, the church is unified. There will be no 30 Years' War. No centuries of Catholic-Protestant conflict. There will only be order, a silent, suffocating order, where the most dangerous thought a person can have is their own. The fire has gone out, but you are left with the cold ashes of a faith that has traded its prophetic fire for imperial security. The individual has been sacrificed on the altar of the state, and you are one of the priests officiating the ceremony. The year is 1750 AD. You are walking through the gardens of the imperial palace on the Palatine Hill in Rome. The city of Rome itself, after centuries of being a secondary capital to the administrative center of Ravenna, has been reborn under a new line of emperors as a monumental symbol of power. The gardens are a masterpiece of control. Every hedge is perfectly sculpted. Every fountain flows with a precise, mathematically calculated arc of water. Every gravel path is raked into pristine patterns. It is beautiful, orderly, and utterly sterile. There is not a single weed, not a single unpruned branch. It is a perfect metaphor for the empire you inhabit. You are Octavius Cotta, a senator of a very old family. Your ancestors served the Republic, advised the early Augusti, and survived the centuries of turmoil. Now, in this age of seeming tranquility, your role is largely ceremonial. You attend meetings of the Senate, a debating society with no real power. You manage your vast family estates in Africa and Hispania, which are run with machine-like efficiency by hereditary administrators. You write poetry in a classical Latin that no one but your small circle of fellow aristocrats still speaks with any fluency. Your life is one of immense privilege and profound irrelevance. This is the Roman Empire in its high autumn. It is a vast, stable, and seemingly eternal superstate. Its frontiers are secure. The legions, armed with mass-produced armor from the water-powered fabricae, and now equipped with primitive but effective black powder firearms manufactured in state arsenals, hold the lines. The Rus in the east have been fought to a standstill. The caliphate is in a slow decline. The gold and silver of the New World fill the treasury. The imperial bureaucracy, 1 million strong, manages everything from the grain dole in Rome to the tin mines in Britannia, with a ponderous but inescapable efficiency. The empire has solved every problem it has ever faced, and in doing so, it has created the ultimate problem: stagnation. You've just returned from a tour of the northern provinces. In Londonium, a bustling but grimly functional port city, you met with merchants. They complained in hushed tones about the suffocating effect of the imperial guilds, which set prices, controlled trade routes, and stifled any innovation that might disrupt the established order. An inventor who had devised a more efficient steam engine for draining mines saw his plans confiscated by the College of Artificers, who declared his invention unnecessarily disruptive to the established system of state-run enterprises. In Paris, you visited the university. You found the scholars there debating the finer points of Augustinian theology, a debate that has been going on for 400 years. They write commentaries on commentaries. The intellectual world is a closed loop, endlessly recycling the state-approved canon of the Latin classics and the Church Fathers. The scientific method, as we know it, has not emerged. There is no royal society, no free exchange of ideas between independent thinkers. All research is state-funded and directed toward practical, military, or administrative ends. Astronomy is for improving naval navigation. Metallurgy is for making better cannons. There is no room for pure, curiosity-driven inquiry. The pursuit of knowledge for its own sake is seen as a frivolous luxury. This is the great, suffocating paradox of the Eternal Empire. Its very stability has become a prison. The social and political turmoil that, in our timeline, acted as a crucible for new ideas has been smoothed over, managed, and suppressed. There was no renaissance in the disruptive Italian city-state sense, only a continuous, state-managed revival of classical forms. There was no reformation to break the chains of religious authority and empower individual conscience. And now, there can be no enlightenment. The core ideas of the Enlightenment, the sovereignty of the individual, the concept of natural rights, the belief in reason as a tool to challenge and remake society, the separation of powers are not just alien to this world, they are fundamentally treasonous. The individual is not sovereign, he is a subject of the emperor. Rights are not natural, they are privileges granted by the state. Reason is a tool for serving the empire, not for questioning it. The powers of church, state, and military are not separated. They are fused in the divine person of the emperor. Your ethical dilemma is one of quiet despair. You are one of the few people with the education and the leisure to see the gilded cage for what it is. You have access to the forbidden texts in your family's private library, the scrolls of Tacitus, the secretly copied manuscripts of Calvin, and even smuggled translations of Arab philosophers. You have read the histories of the Old Republic, and you see how far your civilization has fallen from that ideal of civic liberty. You live in a world of unparalleled peace and prosperity, a world without the constant, bloody wars that tore Europe apart in our timeline. But the price is a world without freedom, without intellectual vibrancy, without the chaotic spark of human genius. Is this a fair trade? This is the question that haunts your sleepless nights. Billions of people have lived and died in peace under the shadow of the eagle. They have been fed, protected from barbarians, and given the spiritual certainty of the imperial church. Who are you to say that their comfortable, orderly lives are inferior to a life of dangerous freedom? You are a beneficiary of this system. Your wealth, your status, your very existence is predicated on its continuation. To challenge it would be to destroy yourself and plunge the world into the very chaos the empire was created to prevent. The ironic twist is that the seeds of change are being planted, not from within, but from without. Your agents in the north, beyond the Rhine and Danube, send disturbing reports. The barbarian kingdom-sluice confederations of Germanic tribes, Scandinavians, and the remnants of the Rusha have been learning. For centuries, they have been a foil for Roman power, a source of slaves, and a convenient enemy. but they have been trading with Rome, and they have been thinking, unconstrained by a rigid imperial bureaucracy. Their blacksmiths and craftsmen have begun to innovate. They have developed a printing press with movable type, an idea that never took hold in Rome because the state-run scriptoria saw it as a threat to their monopoly. They are printing book histories, religious tracts, and crude political pamphlets in their own languages, fostering a sense of shared identity outside the Roman orbit. Their kings, who rule by the consent of their warrior nobles, have a more dynamic and responsive political system. They are beginning to match Roman firearms technology. You sit on a marble bench, watching an albino peacock strut across the lawn. The garden is perfect. The empire is perfect. But it is the perfection of a museum piece. It is a society that has mastered the art of preservation, but has forgotten the art of creation. It is old, tired, and deeply, deeply conservative. It is brittle. You fear that it is a beautiful, hollow shell. The fall of Rome was not an event in 476 AD. The empire has been falling slowly, imperceptibly, for 1,000 years, falling inward. And you suspect that the barbarians, the people your civilization has defined itself against for its entire existence, are about to give it the final push. The gilded cage has kept the world safe, but it has also made it weak, and the wolves are gathering at the gate. The year is 1890 AD. The air in the city of Vindobona, Vienna, is thick with the smell of coal smoke and the metallic tang of fear. The city, for centuries a proud bastion of the Roman Danubian frontier, is now a war zone. Barricades made of overturned carriages, paving stones, and fine furniture block the broad, classical avenues. The crackle of rifle fire echoes between the ornate facades of the government buildings. From the north, you can hear the deep, rhythmic crump of artillery, a sound that is shaking more than just the city's foundations. It is shaking the foundations of the world. You are not a soldier or a senator. You are Helena, a medical student at the Imperial University, one of the first women to be grudgingly admitted to the faculty. You are supposed to be studying the works of Galen, whose medical theories have remained largely unchallenged for 17 centuries. Instead, you are in a makeshift hospital set up in the grand ballroom of the provincial governor's palace, trying to staunch the bleeding of a young legionary whose leg has been shattered by a new kind of bullet fired from a new kind of rifle. His uniform is the traditional crimson of the legions, but the standardized mail armor he wears over it offered no protection against the high-velocity round. He is bleeding out on a floor where generations of Roman aristocrats have waltzed, and with him, an age is dying, the unsetting Sunday. That is what the imperial poets and propagandists have called the Roman Empire for the last 500 years, a global power, stretching from the highlands of Peruvia to the coasts of Africa and the fortress cities of Britannia, an empire that seemed as permanent and as natural as the sun itself. But today, the sun is setting. It is being shot out of the sky. The attack came with a speed and ferocity that stunned the Imperial High Command. The Northern Alliancia Confederation of the German-speaking kingdoms beyond the Rhine, the Scandinavian Federation, and the vast, semi-nomadic Rus-Slavic Empire to the easters launched a coordinated, full-scale invasion. This is not a barbarian raid. This is a modern war. For centuries, Rome has been complacent, locked in its gilded cage. Its military technology evolved slowly, driven by the bureaucratic inertia of the state arsenals. Its legions are professional, disciplined, and brave, but they are trained to fight set-piece battles, to form shield walls, to advance in perfect, stately lines. They are an army of the 18th century, a magnificent anachronism. The Northerners are something new. Their societies, forged in the chaotic crucible outside the empire's walls, are dynamic, adaptable, and ruthlessly innovative. Their armies are not professional, but are based on mass conscription, fired by a new, potent ideology: nationalism. They don't fight for a salary and a distant, godlike emperor. They fight for the Volk, for the fatherland. Their factories, untethered by imperial guilds, have developed breech-loading rifles that can fire 10 rounds a minute compared to the Legion's 2. They have developed steel artillery that can fire explosive shells over the heads of their own advancing troops. They communicate using the electric telegraph, a device the Roman College of Artificers dismissed as a frivolous toy. They move their armies on a sprawling network of railways, a technology that has exploded across their lands while Rome was still perfecting its stone-paved roads. The war is a catastrophe. The Rhine frontier, held for over 1,000 years, was breached in a week. The legions were outmaneuvered, outflanked, and annihilated by superior firepower. Now, the northern armies are pouring into Gaul and Pannonia. The city of Vindobona is the linchpin of the Danubian defence, and it is about to break. The irony is overwhelming. The fall of Rome, the event that was averted in 476 AD, is happening now, in the equivalent of your world's Victorian era, and it is happening for the same reasons. The empire has become too vast, too complex, too rigid to adapt. Its enemies are more dynamic and have a stronger will to fight. The great, stabilizing success of Majorian and his successors did not prevent the fall. It just postponed it for 1,400 years. It created a long, slow, comfortable decline, masking the rot within until it was too late. Your ethical dilemma is staring you in the face. Lying on a bloody cot, the young soldier is dying. You know from your officially forbidden study of smuggled northern medical journals that his only chance is amputation, performed quickly, in a sterile environment, to prevent gangrene. But the chief surgeon of the hospital, a dogmatic old traditionalist, forbids it. It is against the teachings of Galen. One must balance the humours, he insists. He orders you to apply a poultice of herbs and to pray. To defy him is to be expelled, to be disgraced. To obey him is to watch this boy die for no reason other than the suffocating weight of tradition. In this single, desperate moment, you see the entire tragedy of your civilization. It is a world that has chosen stability over truth, tradition over progress. You make a choice. While the chief surgeon is busy in another ward, you bar the door. You take the bone saw from your medical kit. You whisper a prayer to God, to Aesculapius. You're not sure which, and you begin to cut. It is a brutal, messy, desperate act of rebellion. It is your own small, personal declaration that the old way is dead. And you are not alone. Across the city, across the empire, the great, monolithic structure is beginning to crack. In the New World provinces, the local elites, the descendants of Romanized native aristocrats, are watching the news of the war with keen interest. They feel little loyalty to the distant, failing emperor in Ravenna. They are beginning to think of independence, of creating their own empires on the ashes of the old one. In the universities, students are secretly reading the pamphlets of northern political philosophers like Kant and Hegel. Dangerous ideas about freedom, reason, and the spirit of history that have been smuggled across the frontier. The heresy of the individual, so ruthlessly suppressed for centuries, is being reborn. The fall of Rome in 476 AD led to a dark age, a fragmentation of power that eventually gave rise to the dynamic, violent, and innovative nations of modern Europe. This fall, the fall of 1890, will be different. It is the collapse of a global, technologically advanced, albeit stagnant, civilization. It will not be a dark age of lost knowledge, but a global firestorm. The legions, for all their outdated tactics, are still a formidable force. The empire will not die quietly. The war will be long, it will be brutal, and it will be global. The provinces will break away. Civil wars will erupt. The Northern Alliance itself, once the common Roman enemy is gone, will likely turn on itself in a struggle for the spoils. You finish the amputation. You have saved the soldier's life, for now. You look out the window. A shell has struck the top of the imperial basilica, and the golden eagle that has stood there for 1,000 years is teetering on its perch. You realize you are not witnessing the end of an empire. You are witnessing the birth of a new world, a world of nation-states, of ideological conflict, of total war, a world of terrifying, violent, and unpredictable change. The long, dreamlike peace of the Roman world is over. The messy, bloody, and dynamic march of history, postponed for 14 centuries, is about to begin. The unsetting Sunday has finally gone down, and the night will be long and full of terrors. Slow down, breathe, step back from the smoke and the chaos of Vindibona's fall. Let the dust settle. Look back at the two streams of time side by side. In our world, Rome fell, and the light of classical civilization fractured into 1,000 pieces. From that violent, chaotic darkness, something new and arguably unprecedented was born. Nations, capitalism, science, the idea of the individual, the very concept of progressal of it, grew in the soil of a fragmented Europe, where no single power could ever impose a lasting, universal order. The price was centuries of warfare, plague, and instability. The prize was the dynamic, modern world we now inhabit, for better and for worse. In the world we just left, the light never went out. It was preserved, protected, and focused into a single, steady, unblinking beam. The Roman Empire did not fall, it endured. It gave billions of people a life free from the constant warfare that defined our own history. It achieved a level of peace and stability on a scale we can barely imagine. It built a world of order, of reason, of magnificent, enduring monuments. It was a gilded cage, perhaps, but a cage that kept the wolves at bay for 1,400 years. Which was better? To live as a peasant in the brutal, short-lived freedom of 14th century France, or as a well-fed but unfree worker in a 14th century Roman fabrica? To die in the wars of religion, or to have your soul-searching heresy quietly erased by the imperial state? Their world avoided our Dark Age, but paid for it by missing our Renaissance, our Reformation, our Enlightenment. They traded the turbulent genius of adolescence for a long, quiet, and ultimately sterile adulthood. Their fall, when it finally came, was not a descent into darkness, but an explosion into a violent, modern light. They leaped in a single generation from imperial certainty to the raw, terrifying world of nationalism, total war, and ideological conflict. Perhaps history is a river that can be dammed, but never stopped. Perhaps the pressure of humans striving for freedom, for identity, for change will always, eventually, break through. They did not avoid the storm, they only delayed it, and in doing so, made it all the more terrible when it finally broke. There are no easy answers here, just the quiet, unsettling hum of what could have been.